Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know, I'm your humble host, the Yao-Ming of Revolution. Over a dozen NASA scientists and a UFO general missing. Something fishy about this. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Where the hardest working revolutionary and commentator and newsman in the business is back. And we can't overlook this story. Over a dozen NASA scientists, UFO general. How are these people missing? Who killed them? This is very strange. Let's get into the content. Salute.
And then there were 10 missing scientists tied to NASA and Los Alamos, found either dead or missing. Nearly all of them worked together in some capacity and died or vanished within the last 2 years. Take a look at this. This was published by the Daily Mail today, and we'll get to all of these and sort of their connections here in a moment. There's Frank Mywald, died in July of 2024, no autopsy. Carl Grillmar shot in February of 2026. Michael Hicks died July of 2023. The cause of his death is still hidden.
Hey, brother, this sounds very suspicious. You see, this ain't our government. These secret societies planning something very dirty and something very dangerous and doing some very outrageous demonic stuff, you know, and it's just getting so glaring to the people. This is not the U.S. government. This is the secret societies that run the U.S. government, that run the world, that overthrow governments. They behind this. But that's why we're going to dig deep to this information, because I want to know what the hell going on.
Monica Reyes literally vanished in front of people. I mean, remarkably on a hike, just vanished almost out of thin air, it seems, in June of 2025. Melissa Casillas vanished in June of 2025. Anthony Chavez vanished in May of 2025. Two-star General William McCasland, who also had connections to Monica Reyes, suddenly vanished in February of 2026, just left the house. Now, Stephen Garcia, now confirmed missing. So we have this confirmation. Here is Stephen Garcia, 48 years old, vanished without a trace in August of 2025. So as these pieces are now coming together, we're figuring this out. Here he is, last seen in Albuquerque, New Mexico, carrying only a handgun, left his keys, left his phone, and is just walking with a handgun. FBI officials come forward, former FBI officials admitting that even foreign intelligence has targeted nuclear and nuclear rocket experts for years, people tied to these programs. I mean, of course, just look back at the Star Wars program and the missing individuals there, 22 bizarre deaths as part of the Star Wars program under the Reagan administration. So are these people being silenced? What the hell is going on here? Jay Anderson is the host of Project Unity on YouTube, and he joins us now. Jay, great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Clayton and Natalie. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. And, 10 scientists, 36 months now, zero explanations. I mean, autopsies that weren't allowed, cover-ups, and vanishings, and there's no one's talking about it. I mean, we're talking about it, but where is the Trump administration? Where is Carolyn Levitt out at the podium demanding answers on all of this? Because is it because they know what's going on here? Is it because it's a tit for tat?
Well, a little bit like you just highlighted. One of the first things I'd point out is the incidents involving the killing and death and missing status of scientists that share connections through their respective fields, especially in the realms of national security and classified technology research, is not an unheard of thing by any means. A particularly famous case, which you just highlighted, is the 25 or so scientists and engineers connected to the UK defense contractor GEC Marconi. Now, many of those scientists back in the 1980s were connected, as you said, to the Reagan-era Star Wars defense initiative. Now, that was the goal at the time, to make nuclear missiles obsolete by building a system that could detect and destroy them before they hit the United States. And a string of mysterious deaths and suicides and disappearances within this network follows the kind of pattern you'd expect to see from a coordinated effort of some form to silence these people. And what we see here, with now 10 missing scientists, Stephen Garcia being the latest missing, a nuclear official, and all of the various names in this group of 10 were connected in one way or another into the realms of black budget technology, high energy physics, and even the search for extraterrestrial life at a time of immense geopolitical instability, and at a time when the current administration of the United States has publicly voiced an interest and a desire in rendering their currently classified UFO-related intelligence declassified. So it makes me wonder if there are elements within the murkier levels of private aerospace with loose connections to governmental programs who are concerned about, well, daylight breaking into their black projects. And although we can't be certain, much like the GEC Marconi incident in the 80s, we see a pattern here, and I don't think it would be right to ignore that pattern.
Can we surmise what kind of research will be thwarted with these deaths? I know we can't know, but can we surmise?
Well, I would say the killing of Professor Nuno Loureiro in 2025 is one of the biggest concerns and red flags for me. He was shot at his home, and he was widely regarded as a top-tier scientist in fusion physics. He was a leading plasma physicist and fusion researcher, and these are exactly the types of exotic energy and propulsion avenues that cross over into extreme national security secrecy and the potential for your life to be in danger if you were to divulge those secrets. Another example, General William McCasland, who's been missing for well over a month now, I believe, he was revealed through the WikiLeaks emails targeting John Podesta to be a senior advisor on the UFO subject to none other than Tom DeLonge, the rock star celebrity who founded To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science and brought the likes of Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon and Jim Semivan, all of these various government, defense, DOD, CIA guys onto the scene as the public face of government UFO disclosure. So the WikiLeaks emails actually show that Tom was bragging to John Podesta about how General William McCasland was one of his top advisors on the UFO subject. And so when you see the general disappear alongside several prominent scientists in the realm of exotic physics, plasma research, the search for extraterrestrial technosignatures, we can begin to see how a situation could be coordinated.
It's so easy to become a podcaster with Riverside. First, go to Riverside and open an account. When you're ready to record, just hit rec to capture high-quality audio and video, all from the comfort of, anywhere. Even if the only camera you have is on your phone. With Riverside, you'll still look like a pro. The equipment doesn't matter. You'll get a professional-looking podcast using anything you already have.
Is it a clue that when Professor Loureiro he was a Portuguese, and as soon as his death broke, it was spun by Zionists as an anti-Zionist killing, as an anti-Semitic death? And then that later turned out to be false. He was not targeted for being Jewish. I don't know that he even was. Is that this initial narrative spin that was picked up, is that a clue, do you think?
Well, I think Mossad, above all of the other intelligence agencies, has a pretty deep hand in the Black Project. So it wouldn't surprise me if narratives were being spun from that side of the water. But I can't speak to the exact accuracy of whether or not that was, part of a game plan. But it would certainly be part of the kind of, the rule book and the toolkit that's deployed by the intelligence agencies, especially by Mossad.
Okay.
What about the Chinese piece of this? We had Brandon Weichert on from the NatSec podcast, national security expert, a few weeks ago. He found that similar vanishings were happening on the Chinese side. So that's why I sort of asked you at the beginning, if this is like a tit for tat, is China maybe at the heart of this? And then I want to follow up because, I'll put it as one big cornucopia question for you, Jay, which is, we have these secret space program collaborations. We've talked about them on our show at length with Russia, with China, working on these ARC projects and other things. And that collaboration is well known within that community. So when we have this kind of collaboration with the Chinese and the Russians on these secret space programs, the moon base and all of these things, why would we be killing each other's scientists if that is at the heart of it?
Well, I worry that it supersedes governments and nation states. I think that there was a time in the chronology back in, let's say, like the 1940s, 50s era, where a lot of this, in terms of exotic energy, and especially when it starts to become related to potential non-human technology, non-human biologics, all that kind of recovery discussion that we're seeing become very popular now, there seems to have been a time where this splintered off from government official research into the kind of murky depths of private aerospace. And a lot of the concerns, especially when it comes to black budget technology and breakaway technology, secret space programs, is that there is an element of this that's a transnational group, a private group that's had access to extremely advanced technology for a number of decades and supersedes governments and nations and maybe carrying out their own operations completely rogue of any sort of official, foreign policy. They're completely on their own in the jungle, so to speak. So there's a real concern that there is actually a breakaway from privatization and that they're running the show in terms of doing these types of operations on, a global scale, making sure that people are silenced when they need to be silenced, which would explain why certain elements of teamwork that seem apparent on the world stage do not play out when you get into the kind of deep black and the classified world. But I do think that there is a genuine concern and a reality, especially when you start doing the research into what was happening with the electrogravitic studies in the 1950s, exotic energy research in the 1950s, the Cold War, all of the paranoia around that. There was a time where this seemed to splinter off from the official world. And I think the last president to really know that was President Eisenhower. And he actually warned of the military industrial complex in a very, very famous end of presidency speech where he just gave a long warning of the various elements of the military industrial complex taking control far beyond the official remit of government. And so I think we have to be concerned about the potential for a breakaway rogue element that's doing these operations, if it is indeed an operation.
Yeah, there's too many similarities here because you could look at some of these individuals. Oh, maybe they just had a really dark period in their life. They wandered off with a gun. Yeah. Something was going on in their life. But then when you have like General McCasland, a 2-star general who was, by all accounts, really considered like a UFO gatekeeper, who then has this connection to Monica Reyes, who was on a hike with her friends, and she vanishes almost in thin air. They've never found her. She's standing there, and 2 of her friends were with her, and she just vanishes out of thin air. Like, what the hell? Like, what? So I guess you could have these like one-off situations. Someone's under stress. They had a bet. Something's going on here. But to have that happen, and they're connected, Monica Reyes and McCasland, and they both go vanishing?
Well, this is the thing. When you bring up a mind map of everyone involved, the lines almost intersect completely with everyone involved, especially with General McCasland, who sat on the Special Access Program Oversight Committee, the SAPOC, he was the executive secretary of the Special Access Program Oversight Committee, which just branches down into all of the black projects. So he was very aware of the most classified elements of the U.S. government's defense and research and, classified special access program, unacknowledged special access program world. So he, above all of the others, especially because of this WikiLeaks reveal through John Podesta's emails that, Tom DeLonge, I know Tom DeLonge's just a rock star and a celebrity, but he was legitimately connected to all of these people in the Pentagon. And the fact that he wasn't saying this publicly, but was bragging to John Podesta in the back channels on emails that, listen, General McCasland is on my team and he's a senior advisor. He was there at the right time at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and at Los Alamos National Labs during the Roswell kind of acquisition time. So it's very clear that someone like McCasland, even if this isn't related to what he was doing in the UFO world, he certainly was involved in the UFO world. And, people being connected to him who were also missing. This is a pattern we can't ignore. And I'd also remind people when it comes to suppressing information that literally thousands of inventions, breakthroughs in various sectors have been actively suppressed by the US government under the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951. Literally thousands. We also have known cases of breakthrough technologies being halted through wet work or assassination. So a famous case of that being Stanley Meyer, the inventor of a water-powered car that
water energy
electrolysis.
Stanley Meyer,
and breaking down hydrogen bonds with a toroidal electromagnetic coil engine. And they seized his invention before he could even get it to the patent office. And then not long after that, He was found dead in the streets after running out of a cafe screaming, "I've been poisoned, I've been poisoned." So, there's a precedent already set, established from the 1950s, of drastic action being taken in the so-called name of national security. And we may very well be seeing a similar situation unfold before us with this recent grouping of dead and missing scientists and high-ranking military with connections into exotic physics and classified research. I mean, it's something we need to keep in mind as all of this develops.
Great points.
Yeah.
Here, take a look at Jay's Twitter account here. Jay has you were just on
right about this.
the Joe Rogan show. Hopefully you'll replace this soon up here with the redacted. Hopefully, no, just joking. Just joking. But congrats on that.
I just wanted to. One of these secret societies, they didn't kidnap these people. They got these people somewhat doing something very demonic and some very dangerous.
Scroll down a little bit here because of your work on the Peru story. And just wanted to kind of promote that for you. So your research here in this 2-hour-long documentary about
from black technology to ancient sites. I have many hats.
Yeah. So tell us about this 2-hour documentary. How can people support you and check this out?
Well, thank you so much for promoting that, by the way. I really, really appreciate that because it's not connected to this, but that's really awesome of you. You can check it out on X, guys, if you go on to the Project Unity. It's also on my YouTube channel. All of my different documentaries are on my YouTube channel, Project Unity. I'm very, very interested in the mysteries and harder to explain elements of ancient history, where when you start to look back at the mainstream historical narrative we've been taught, and you just examine with a bit more of a critical eye, you start to realize there are some serious problems with the way that we've just bundled things together into strange chronologies. And Peru and Egypt and a few other places that I've been to are key areas of the world where you just have incredible examples of architecture and stone lifting. It's huge, multi-tons that should not have been possible at the time. So I went out to Peru and I went out to Egypt and various other places. This particular one is in Peru, 2 hours,
subterranean
about 1 hour and 40 minutes long in total. And it's a feature-length 4K documentary, all fully filmed by me, going through some of the most incredible ancient megalithic sites in Peru. And so if that's something that you're interested in, that's one of the main subjects I focus on, as well as classified technology and the mysteries of the national security state. So I definitely appreciate any support.
Both of them were.
Joining us now is Lauren Conlon. She is the East Coast contributor for LA Magazine. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you for having me and covering this story.
Yeah. So let's talk. I mean, we've had a great amount of interest, a lot of inquiries around all of these missing scientists and some of these mysterious circumstances. Let's put this latest one up here on the screen. We have a missing nuclear official becomes the 10th person tied to this dark pattern surrounding U.S. secrets. So top line, Lauren, you've actually dug into the circumstances of these. Is this a real story, or is the Daily Mail or the tabloids, are they making it more out than it should be, or should we all really be paying attention?
I mean, I think we should all be paying attention. I think this is very important that this is coming to light. So I think the people that say, oh, well, it's a coincidence because this happened in 2022. This happened in 2019. No one was paying attention then, but we're paying attention now. And what we're seeing is a pattern. And I don't want to sound cliche here because I think what's going on beyond some of the mysterious circumstances of these deaths or of these disappearances. We're seeing names like Michael David Hicks, who was a NASA scientist. And, off the top of my head, I'm like, well, I don't necessarily think that it's so odd that there's no cause of death listed. He didn't have an autopsy. We don't know his religion, etc. But then when you see a pattern, someone else whose death kind of echoed that, like Frank Maywald, you have to wonder, is it one? Possibly, and I'm speculating, they did take their own life, and this is because out of respect for the family, they don't want this out there. Or is it the elephant in the room here? Is it something bigger? Is it something connected to the government where these people have a lot of classified information? I don't even want to, I've gotten a lot of heat for saying that.
Sure.
And I want to be clear, I don't have proof of anything, but I am just saying the elephant in the room. The government is not above this. And it doesn't always go through the president. The president doesn't always know what the hell is going on.
Right? May
Exactly.
not even be our government.
And so I go back to saying, you know, Tim Burchett, love him, love the guy, but he's like, President Trump will disrupt. He will do this. Okay, go for it. We'll all be waiting. I just don't see that happening. President Clinton said he wanted to release the JFK files, you know, also the UFO files. That never happened. Obama, you know, really wanted to release the UAP files, talked very highly about Area 51. Nothing happened there. There's a reason for that, guys. And I know that whistleblowers have come out and said that we might be ready, right? As a society, we might be ready. I think it's twofold. I think it's a tough answer. What I will say, why we want more transparency now and why the House Oversight Committee is demanding these 46 UAP videos is because we are at war, guys. I mean, it is very important because if you look at this list of videos, you know, they do indicate some videos, or I'm sorry, some UAPs are flying over Iran in 2022, Syria, one shaped like a cigar. We're talking about conflict areas. So we are not able to tell in real time if this is a drone, if this is a UAP, or if this is some kind of enemy defense. And so I think that, you know, us getting transparency, it'll be a big, big difference in whether or not we face disaster or defense.
Well, and let's get this next headline up on the screen. This is from the New York Post last week on the case of Michael Hicks. Another mysterious NASA death as ninth scientist linked to secret programs dies. Now, in the case of Michael Hicks, this death was in July of 2023. The Post reports, quote, "It is unclear if there's any foul play linked to Hicks's death, but his obituary asks for donations in his memory to go to Alcoholics Anonymous." He joins 8 other scientists or top officials who have died or disappeared recently. A couple of things I just want to zero in just from that last paragraph. First of all, evidence of foul play limited in this case. Looks like they're asking for donations to Alcoholics Anonymous. Secondly, when they say, quote, recently, this is a death back in 2023. People are going into the records, doing what journalists should do and trying to connect the dots, see if there are any more dots to be found, frankly. So are there similarities that stand out in these cases? I have seen a couple of them where it seems like maybe there's a substance, pre-existing substance condition, but that doesn't, or substance abuse condition, but we don't have any confirmation. We don't know what that actually could mean in the context of the deaths and disappearances. Even that question of which of these are deaths and which of these are disappearances, now that we're up to 10, it's sort of all hard to wrap your head around. So maybe help us find patterns that you've noticed.
Yeah, you're right about that. And we don't have enough info. I am in the process of reaching out to certain family members that I can find. Some of these deaths, though, and I'm talking specifically about the deaths that we are 100% confirmed on, like Carl Grillmere, these are very fresh. I don't feel, you know, as a human being, just, you know, comfortable reaching out to a widow right away, right? But, you know, Michael David Hicks, it's been a few years, and I go back to saying, I don't necessarily think that his death is directly connected to, let's say, General McCasland's death. I think Michael David Hicks's death could be more connected to Frank Maywald, and possibly, yes, they were dealing with substance abuse issues, and that could be connected to everything that they were working on, everything that they knew, and I don't have proof of that. But yeah, go ahead.
So can you just explain a little bit, if people aren't super familiar, like General McCasland, you and I are familiar, Frank Maywald as well. What were they working on? What's the possible connection? Because you've done a great job of actually highlighting the suspicious circumstances around these.
Yeah, so Frank Maywald, he was a NASA JPL scientist. He was a principal researcher at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. And so he was trying to detect signs of human life on other planets. I obviously don't know what he found. He knows what he found. I'm assuming a handful of people know what he found. I don't think Congress knew what he found, but I don't know. And Carl Grillmere, what I will say about his death, I connect Carl Grillmere's, or I'm sorry, let's go back. I will say Neil McCasland's death. General Neil McCasland, he was a retired Air Force general, and he retired a number of years ago, but he was stationed at one point at Wright-Patterson. That's in Ohio, and if you're not familiar, reportedly, they hold extraterrestrial debris from the 1947 Roswell crash there. Again, I've never seen it with my own eyes, but he also worked with Monica Reyes there, and she was a rocket science. She co-patented the Mandeloy, or co-invented the Mandeloy. So she was very, very intelligent, as was General McCasland. And Monica Reyes disappeared while hiking in June of 2025 in California. And Neil McCasland disappeared in February of 2025, just walking out of his house in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So these are months apart. Monica Reyes gives me chills. Number one, she seemed to have disappeared into thin air. She was behind a friend or two while hiking about 30 feet. It's kind of like they look back and they're like, hey, and then a second later, or I don't even know, a minute later, she's gone, vanishes into thin air. There's very little known about this search, but what I could find was that they had a canine dog. They were sniffing around. They found a hat. Her scent stopped at this hat. I mean, what? And she was actually marked deceased and had like some kind of biodegradable burial. And I know that anybody can go online and do this. I understand how that works. But that's very odd that someone would do that when there was no body and there was no statement from NASA, no nothing. We just kind of skimmed over this. And what I'll say is, and again, I don't have proof, but former FBI agent Chris Swecker, he has a lot of great information and a lot of great intel about what happens when these people are possibly kidnapped and tortured for intelligence. And he's not saying it's by our own government, right?
Right.
We don't know who it is. We're not saying that it's not.
Yeah.
Right. But there's all these options. And then Neil McCasland, this is very similar to the 10th person missing, the 10th official, Stephen Garcia. Both of them were last seen in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I mentioned General McCasland walked out of his home. At the time, his wife didn't know if any guns were missing from his gun safe, but officials from the sheriff's office later reported that he was missing a revolver. He didn't take his phone, didn't take his wallet, nothing that he would need, not his glasses. And Stephen Garcia, and I think I mentioned this was February of 2026. Stephen Garcia, he is another official tied to, he had top security clearance at KCNSC out of New Mexico. He was in charge of all of the classified equipment and assets, tens of thousands of dollars. And, this is through a source. I do not know his job description, verbatim here, but he also was last seen walking around New Mexico with a handgun. And so, with Stephen Garcia, it was stated by officials he could be a danger to himself. Neil McCasland, there was a silver alert, and his wife, in this very, in my opinion, disturbing 911 call, kind of indicates that, quote, he may not want to be found. She said he deliberately changed his clothes before he left. She said he was experiencing this brain and mental fog, and this is one of the reasons that he retired. And she just said he was getting frustrated. But she never would have thought that it would have meant this. And she's been criticized about this 911 call. And I don't want to criticize her because she called immediately, when she realized he was gone, and everybody reacts differently. I don't think that she would have thought that it would have been anything like this. She just said he was kind of frustrated. The last thing I'll say, the last thing I heard from authorities was that they found an Air Force sweatshirt a couple of miles away, but they have not confirmed whether or not that belongs to General McCasland. So I've got to make some calls. And then lastly, I know I am blabbing so hard right now.
Keep going.
One of the deaths that I am very, very invested in, and I think this is this kind of crosses over into some other things we're mentioning in society right now. But Carl Grillmere, he was a Caltech astrophysicist, reportedly a genius, who's doing amazing work in finding water on other planets. He lived in Llano, California, in a very isolated area. I mean, you can pull up the map and you can just see his house, very isolated. So in December of 2025, he sees a guy walking on his property who we now know is Freddie Snyder, carrying a rifle. And he's freaked out, obviously. So he calls 911. Freddie Snyder gets arrested. He says, oh, I was going to the post office. I just needed this to protect myself against wild animals. Well, the post office was the other way. And he gets arrested. And for whatever reason, they give him a felonies charge. And I shouldn't say for whatever reason, for whatever reason is they let him go. They release him ROR after that felonies charge. And by February 6th, prosecutors dropped the charge entirely. The judge dropped the charge entirely. There's some kind of California penal code where essentially it says in lay terms, if you don't have any priors, you know, something like this would make sense. We're going to drop this. We're not going to keep you coming back to court, etc. Well, that was February 5th. By February 16th, Freddie Snyder allegedly goes back and shoots Carl Grillmair in the torso on his porch at his home. And now Freddie Snyder is sitting at Twin Towers, I'm assuming, you know, pretty close to Nick Reiner, and waiting arraignment. He gets arraigned April 29th. So what's crazy is that California is so ridiculous with their court dockets and their papers. I've had to write letters to get indictments. I've had to send FOIA requests here. But one thing I will say is Carl Grillmair's wife has spoken out. Was right before I went on News Nation last week. The producers, we were all kind of diving in. They were making calls. And his wife said it's not connected to any of these other scientists. That's her belief.
Let's fly.
McCasland's wife came out and said it's not connected. The Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office in New Mexico has said enough with the conspiracy theories. I get it. I totally get it. Neil McCasland's wife also works in aerospace research, and Carl Grillmair's wife, she's a widow. She probably saw this crazy person with her own eyes. But my question is, why was he released? Why was he there? He was absolutely targeting him for a reason. This house is way too isolated. And reportedly, he did live in the area, this Freddie Snyder guy, and neighbors, I say neighbors because it's miles apart, they said he was a little unhinged. I mean, it's bothering me. I can't help it. It's bothering me.
I see what you're saying.
And
if you look at every individual case, it is a possible explanation. And yeah, in no way, you know, the widows, of course, they don't want to be harassed. And anybody who's watching this, please don't harass these people, right? And, you know, and leave them alone at the very least. Let's go to the authorities, and those are the people who we can ask. But as you said, members of Congress and others, they're worried about this. That seems to be maybe an indication of something bigger. Maybe they're just responding to media pressure. But from your view, maybe not each individual case, in totality, you see some sort of pattern. You originally opened with UFOs. Why did you make that connection to UFO?
Yeah, it's funny because I always grew up thinking that they're bogus. They're just something in an alien movie. And the more research you do, the more you realize how important it is that we understand what a UAP is. And I'm calling it a UAP because it just sounds less crazy. It really does. And I just feel like we're past the point of thinking, yes, aliens are going to come and invade our country. It's not about that. The House Oversight Committee wrote this letter in March, but they were stemming it from a congressional meeting they had. I think it was back in September. They really started to push again for transparency. And again, this is for the national security reasons. This is a threat. We need to know what is going on in order to defend ourselves as Americans. And I think it's really important. And what's so frustrating is that the list of UAPs that were actually due on today, I'm sorry, it was yesterday, April 14th, they were due. No one from the Pentagon responded until Rep. Anna Luna had to reach out.
I know.
And apparently, I mean, I was born at night, but not last night. Someone didn't pass the letter on to the proper authorities. So we're not getting it yet, but they claim that this is coming. This is coming, and the president authorized this release. So we're going to see it soon. I'm just like, okay, guys, release another Epstein dump for us so we look this way while you guys scramble. It's
coming.
You know, it's so annoying. It's just, it's irritating. And it's like, this is our tax money also. This is our money, you know, going to this. I don't know how much. I'd like to know. I don't think we'll be told the truth. But I think, again, it's important to know that it's not just about Independence Day aliens sitting in glass, you know, cages in water. It's more than that. This is war. This is America's national defense.
Yeah. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for your time. We got another guest standing by. You were phenomenal. Everybody go follow Lauren on Twitter. We'll have a link down in the description. Appreciate your time, and thank you for the work on this case.
Thank you so much for
Hey guys, hope you're doing well. I just thought I'd give you a quick update on the crazy news that has just hit sort of mainstream, right? It's never nice talking about this because it's just obviously people dying or going missing. But on the 26th of March, I uploaded a video and it was about I think at the time, 7 scientists. And at the time, I said this is a massive coincidence. 7 scientists connected to space tech engineering have either died or gone missing. And I suggest I go into each one of them in high detail. So I suggest you go back and take a little look at that. But it just comes to light now that more have gone missing. And it's even now gone to President Trump. All right, they're asking him the question, which I'll show you the video in a minute. But now it's gone up to 11 scientists connected, all connecting, right? Pretty much. I'm going to show you a little diagram in a minute. But it's odd. Let me just show you the diagram. So I need to do a big shout out to Mystery World News, who put this graph together because it's quite sort of, when you see it, it's just like, whoa, hang on a second. Coincidence becomes no longer a coincidence. Or is it? I don't know. But Mystery World News says this. It's funny that some of us, like me, already posted about how strange the disappearances were on March 20th, and that my graph with the connections went viral and nobody mentions me. Ha ha ha. Well, I'm mentioning you now, mate. Just things on X and Elon Musk. It catches my attention that is now when we're worried about it and not before. Why? What do they know that we don't? All right. And this is the graph that this person's put together. These are the people, right? I'm going to show you another one as well. But these are the people that have gone missing connected to space engineering, right? Now, a lot of people are saying that this is connected to reverse engineering or free energy of some sort, okay? This is all we've got, right? This is all we've got, really. And yes, it's strange that these connected. But what I've done is I've sort of edited this because these could be any date ranges, right? People die. There's thousands of people in these companies, right? So these things happen. And is it a case of where we want to? It's not like want to. Maybe a couple of people came up where it was like originally a bit of a coincidence, and then you sort of dig deep into things and find out more, and you go, oh, this is connected to this is connected, and then you've found out you've got a big mince pie. I don't know where that came from, but anyway, right? So that's the original. These are the dates, the years of when they went missing: 2026, 23, 24, 25, 26, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25. All seems bit crazy that all these people have disappeared within that space of time, especially in 2025. We know about William Neal McCasland that I did a separate video on, which is a bit odd how he's just disappeared. And then this young lady straight afterwards, right? In fact, I think she was actually before, right? She also disappeared, went hiking in the woods and never came back. Now, the latest one we've got, so that's 10 there, I think, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, yeah. The latest one that's just come up now is this lady here. And this is really strange about this one, okay? Now, given this is a couple of years ago when she died in 2022. Listen to this. A scientist experimenting with anti-gravity tech was found dead at 34 after warning that her life could be in danger. What? Marking another mysterious case of deaths and disappearances in recent years. Amy Eskridge was 34 years old when she allegedly died from a self-inflicted gunshot to the head in Huntsville, Alabama on June 11th, 2022. I mean, are we just going to keep on digging up more of these weird occurrences? However, neither the police nor the medical examiners have publicly released any details of her investigation ever taking place. Before the death, she was openly researching and trying to develop anti-gravity technology, a way to control or cancel out gravity, which could revolutionize space travel and energy production. This is the 11th now. So mainstream media somebody asked Donald Trump the question.
10 missing scientists with access to classified stuff, nuclear material, aerospace. They've all gone missing or turned up dead in the last couple months. Based on what you've been briefed, what do you think is happening here? And do you think that this is connected or totally random?
Well, I hope it's random, but we're going to know in the next week and a half. I just left the meeting on that subject. So pretty serious stuff, but we're going to be hopefully, I don't know, coincidence, if you whatever you want to call it. But some of them were very important people, and we're going to look at it over the next short time.
So not much information there. He says he's obviously going to look into it. Now, one hand, you've got anti-gravity, which could then explain many of the UAP evidence that we've got so far. And also on the other end, it could be something to do with free energy. Now, free energy has consequences to the world, good and bad. Well, financially for some people, but financially positive for others. Yeah. I think we all know who is going to benefit and who is not going to benefit, right? Having free energy. Whether, there's many documents out there that says and proves that free energy is impossible. However, a lot of people would argue against that, right? Especially when you come to alien tech. So I'm in a bit of, I'm going to leave it to you guys to decipher what do you think this graph, going to give him another shout out, Mystery World News is all about. How it's all linked together. Is something going on? I mean, if you were to add up every single employee, and I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here now, okay? But if you were to add up every single employee throughout here, right? How many people would that, in fact, let's maybe we could ask ChatGPT. So space research, NASA 18,000, JPL 6,000, Caltech 2,500, blah blah. We're looking at, if you add them together, noting some overlap like Air Force, okay. Without adjustments, 3.3 million. More realistic, removing of major overlaps, DOD, Air Force. You're looking at 500,000 people, okay? Does that make you think, yeah, okay, it's a coincidence? If you've got 500,000 people and some of them die, but then you've got to narrow it down a bit more because of their specific roles of what they were actually working on at the time in that company, right? That narrows it down even more. So then the coincidence turns out to be not so much of a coincidence. Also, in mysterious ways, like brutal ways, gunshots disappearing, never to come back. Like break-ins, I think one of them was. Somebody got broken into and killed. Like, it's just so weird. And also, but then on the flip side, if this was an inside job and these people were taken out, then why has Donald Trump literally just said this?
Remember, I recently directed the Secretary of War. How good is Pete Hegseth doing, by the way? To begin releasing government files relating to UFOs and unexplained aerial phenomena. And I figured this was a good crowd because I know you people, you're really into that. I don't know, I am. So I'm pleased to report today, I thought I'd save it for this crowd, because you're a little bit out there, you know, a little bit, that this process is well underway, and we found many very interesting documents, I must say. And the first releases will begin very, very soon. So you can go out and see if that phenomena is correct. You'll figure it out. Let me know. Let me know.
wouldn't you think that if they wanted to cover something up, they wouldn't be releasing files? Although he has said that before, and he's saying it again now. Is this the time when files are being released? We've also got Congress Rep. Luna called the White House when the Pentagon failed to deliver the 46 UFO videos that she's demanded to be released.
Congresswoman, you set an April 14th deadline for Secretary of War Hegseth to release videos that you've said will shock the country. Has that deadline been met? And what was your last communication with the Pentagon?
It was not met. In fact, I had my staff reach out because I said, have they even responded? And then I had to call the White House because the Pentagon refused to respond, of which they then confirmed receipt and sent us a cute response over to House Oversight, which is where my task force is at that basically stated that they would brief us at a future date. But that's not really their call to make. Obviously, I would consider myself friends with Secretary Hegseth and definitely understood President Trump's directive to classify all these files. So whoever's trying to be cute at the Pentagon is about to get rolled because A, that's not up to them. B, Pete would not undermine the president. And C, this stuff has been ordered for release. And so we will be getting those files whether or not they agree with us.
Yeah, who did they offer to send to brief you? Were they specific about that? And I guess I'm wondering why you think that's insufficient. To me, getting the raw data, the raw information, some of it I've seen in front of the public is a lot more important than just us talking about what our reaction is to it or how we feel about it. How do you view the distinction between a briefing and a true release?
My name is Whitney Allen. I am a widow, and my husband, Ryan, died when he was 35 years old.
Well, they didn't tell us who would brief us. They didn't set a date. And we specifically weren't asking for a briefing. We were asking for known files that exist. I believe the statements on shocking the nation were comments made, I think it was by Jeremy Corbell or whoever another source was. But you and I both know, we've both seen evidence of things that we can't explain. And so I think the fact that whoever was trying to be cute again at the Pentagon that decided to not pass our letter and to not release these at the said date, it just furthers the distrust that exists with the American people and the federal government, which, to be clear, I don't think Hegseth had anything to do with it. I don't even think his senior leadership had anything to do with it. I think it's someone lower level who's trying to, again, block this. And I'll continue to say that we have a right to see this information. We asked for specific documents for a reason. There has been, again, a directive by the president. And so we're going to continue to push for this.
So big shout out to UAP James, by the way, of that. And it also answers my question. So Trump was like, yeah, let's do it. So she's gone to them and said, okay, we'll release the 46 files. And somebody, being cute, as she says, has gone, nope, I'm not going to give this letter away. So what's going on here? So on one hand, you've got, alleged, I'm not even going to say that, people mysteriously disappearing and dying, which suggests we want to keep this under wraps. And then the president and other representatives saying, yeah, okay, we're going to release the files. It's like there's something in the middle that is just blocking the way. What's going on? I ain't got a clue. But what do you think? I try to play devil's advocate on this, right? I hope it doesn't upset people. I'm just trying to, I would be I think disrespectful and also naive just to be jumping on the bandwagon going, oh, it's 11 people that's died now. It's definitely something. It's definitely about this. It's definitely about that. You've got to open your mind up a little bit, don't you think? Or am I wrong? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching and subscribe. Also, I've had a couple of comments.
Gone missing, died suspiciously, taken themselves out, just disappeared without any trace. We're up to 12 people now in this modern era, and a few of these people, it's kind of over the last few years, sort of 2022, 2024, most recently William Neal McCasland this year. There's a couple of people, Monica Jacinto Reyes. There's a bunch of names over the last few years, scientists that are involved in space technology going missing. But what if I told you that back in the day, at the height of the Cold War, all the way back in the 80s, back when Ronald Reagan launched an initiative called Star Wars, there were actually a whole bunch of scientists that had worked on this project that also died too. And the body count for the scientists that were related to that program is way higher than anything we're looking at now, because I'm hearing apparently 22 scientists that worked on the real life Star Wars for Ronald Reagan died mysteriously. A little bit sus, all right? I'm going to break it down to you in this video, but you want to talk about, oh, there's 12 scientists missing. There have been 22 scientists that died specifically in the 80s, the last time this happened, and it does seem like history continually repeats itself. So during the height of the Cold War back in around 1983, President Ronald Reagan launched the Strategic Defense Initiative, nicknamed Star Wars, okay, the real Star Wars. And this was a program that was meant to protect the United States in the event of nuclear war. So here's a little bit of backstory about this defense initiative.
Here, an artist's projection.
Can't lie, the beat sounded a little bit like sounded a little SD kid, sounded like blacked out with a phantom. No, I'll stop.
Here, an artist's projection of the president's vision.
Banning into space, a layered defense to protect the country from nuclear devastation. U.S. spy satellites would watch the world below, detect Soviet missiles blasting off, compute the position and speed of each missile, alert battle stations in space, on Earth. The first response, space-based kinetic energy weapons fire high-speed projectiles from hypervelocity guns, intercepting enemy missiles as they are boosted through the atmosphere. Popped up into space, Earth-based nuclear-powered X-ray lasers fire their radioactive rays. Attack rays from land-based excimer lasers are redirected by huge mirrors orbiting in space. Chemical lasers fire beams that burn through the shell of the onrushing missile. Particle beam weapons with pulsing rays join the attack. Still over the atmosphere, the missile bus ejects its cargo, multiple nuclear warheads. As the remaining Soviet missiles now arc towards the U.S., ground-based projectiles are volleyed into space. Their giant steel ribs shatter the enemy weapons. The final minute. The surviving warheads enter the atmosphere above the United States, are attacked by laser-equipped planes. Earth-based lasers and ABM rockets eliminate the last warheads.
The administration's original claim for the Strategic Defense Initiative was that it would be a perfect.
So not Rich Nixon, Ronald Reagan, basically, they launched the Star Wars. This was a real thing, and they basically wanted to be able to, shoot down. They wanted to be able to use space lasers, kinetic energy to shoot down potential nuclear weapons from the Russians, from the Chinese, all that kind of thing. Okay. Now, this was a big program, and a lot of people worked on this. But what's crazy, okay, is that starting in 1982, 22 British scientists that were involved in this program would one by one mysteriously die, and the list of people who suspiciously lost their lives being involved in this program would eventually become known as the Marconi list. Okay, so I'm going to read you a long article documenting everything that was going on with these Star Wars related deaths, basically. So this is a whole article. The original one isn't even available. There's a lot of stuff offline today. Twitter's not working, all that kind of thing. But basically, this is from ufoevidence.org, the scientific study of UFO phenomenons and the search for extraterrestrial life. It says, who killed off the Star Wars scientists? Did 22 British SDI researchers really all check themselves out? 50-year-old Alistair Beckham was a successful British aerospace projects engineer. His specialty was designing computer software for sophisticated naval defense systems. Like hundreds of other British scientists, he was working on a pilot program for America's Strategic Defense Initiative, better known as Star Wars. And like at least 21 of his colleagues, he died a bizarre and violent death. I ain't even read the article, and I'm already not believing their official story. It says, did 22 British SDI researchers really all check themselves out? 50-year-old Alistair Beckham was a British aerospace engineer, very successful. designing computer software for sophisticated naval defense systems. Okay, and him and 21 of his colleagues died a bizarre and violent death. It was a lazy, sunny Sunday afternoon in August 1998. After driving his wife to work, Beckham walked through his garden to a musty backyard tool shed and sat down on a box next to the door. He wrapped bare wires around his chest, attached to an electrical outlet, and put a handkerchief in his mouth. Then he pulled the switch. With his death, Beckham's name was added to a growing list of British scientists who have died or disappeared under mysterious circumstances since 1982. Already the way he went out, I'm not believing that whatsoever. Not a chance he did that to himself. Each was skilled experts in computers. Each was working on a highly classified project for the American Star Wars program. None had any apparent motive for offing themselves. The British government contends that the deaths are all a matter of coincidence, and they wouldn't lie to you, would they? The British press blame stress. They were all so stressed by the Star Wars that they checked themselves out, and it's still happening today. Give me a break. That is cap. Okay. Others allude to an ongoing fraud investigation involving the nation's leading defense contractor, but relatives left behind don't know what to think. There weren't any women involved. There weren't any men involved. We had a very good relationship, says Mary Beckham, Alistair's widow. We don't know why he did it, if he did it, and I don't believe that he did do it. He wouldn't go out to the shed. There had to be something. Super creepy. The string of unexplained deaths can be traced back to March 1982, when Essex University computer science Dr. Keith Bowden died in a car wreck on his way home from a London social function. Authorities claim Bowden was drunk, but his wife and friends say otherwise. Bowden, 45, was a whiz with supercomputers and computer-controlled aircrafts. He was a co-founder of the Department of Computer Sciences at Essex and had worked for one of the major Star Wars contractors in England. One night, Bowden's immaculately maintained rover careened across a 4-lane highway and plunged off a bridge, down an embankment, into an abandoned rail yard, and he was found dead at the scene. During the inquest, people testified that Bowden's blood alcohol had exceeded the legal limit and he'd been driving too fast. His death was ruled as accidental, but his wife, Hilary Bowden, and her lawyer suspected a cover-up. Friends that he'd supposedly spent the evening with denied Bowden had even been drinking, and there was the condition of his car. My solicitor instructed an accident specialist to examine the automobile. Miss Bowden explained somebody had taken the wheels off and put others on that were old and worn. At the inquest, this was not allowed to be brought up. Someone asked if the car was in a sound condition, and the answer was yes. Hilary, in a state of shock, never protested the published verdict, yet she remains convinced that someone tampered with her husband's car. It certainly looked like foul play, she maintains. 4 years later, the British press finally added Bowden's case to its growing dossier. First, there appeared to be 2 interconnected deaths, then 6, then 12, then suddenly there were 22. It sounds exactly like what's going on now. It says, take 37-year-old David Sands, a senior scientist at ESAMS working on a highly sensitive computer-controlled satellite radar system. In March 1987, Sands made a U-turn on his way to work and rammed his car into a brick wall of a vacant restaurant. His trunk was loaded full of gasoline cans and the car exploded on impact. Given the incongruities of the accident and the lack of a self-deletion motive, the coroner refused to rule out the possibility of foul play. Meanwhile, information leaked to the press suggested Sands had been under a tremendous amount of emotional strain. Margaret Worth, Sands' mother-in-law, claims that these stories are totally inaccurate. When David died, it was a great mystery to us, she admits. He was very successful. He was very confident. He had just pulled off a great coup for his company, and he was about to be greatly rewarded. He had a very bright future ahead of him. He was perfectly happy the week before this all happened. Like many of the bereaved, Worth is still at a loss for answers. One week we think he must have been got at. The next we think it couldn't be anything like that, she says. But the wave of suspicious fatalities in the ultra-secret world of sophisticated weaponry has not gone unnoticed by the United States government. Oh yeah, are they noticing what's going on now? Late last fall, the American Embassy in London publicly requested a full investigation by the British Ministry of Defence. Members of British Parliament, such as Labour MP Doug Hoyle, co-president of the Manufacturing Science and Finance Union, had been making similar requests for more than 2 years. The Thatcher government had refused to launch any sort of inquiry. How much more deaths before we get the government to give answers? The Pentagon refuses to comment on the deaths too. However, according to Reagan administration sources, we cannot ignore it anymore. Actually, British and American intelligence agencies are on the situation. When the Sunday Times in London published the details of 12 mysterious deaths last September, sources at the American embassy admitted being aware of at least 10 additional victims whose names had already been sent to Washington. The sources added the embassy had been monitoring reports of the mysterious deaths for 2 years. Sounds just like what's going on now. It's so creepy. English intelligence has suffered several damaging spy scandals in the 20th century. The CIA may suspect the deaths are an indication of security leaks, that Star Wars secrets are being sold to the Russians. Perhaps these scientists had been blackmailed into supplying classified data to Moscow and could no longer live with themselves. That's a reach. One or more may have stumbled into an espionage ring and been silenced. As NBC News London correspondent Henry Champ put it, in the world of espionage, there is a saying, twice is a coincidence, but 3 times is enemy action. What about 22 times? What about 12 times in the last few years? Enemy action? I think I spoke to a couple of my friends about this. I'm going to keep it real. I'm going to keep going with the article. But I've been speaking to some of my more switched on friends about this situation, people that couldn't possibly believe the alien narrative. And everybody says they think it's the Chinese. Everybody says they think it's a hostile government. Russians, Iranians, Chinese is the main people that people talk about. They say that the Chinese are taking out and murdering the space technologists. All right. So I'm not thinking that aliens are beaming these guys up and probing them and all that kind of stuff. I think most likely it's the Chinese or the Russians or somewhere in between the Iranians, maybe the North Koreans, who knows? But I think they're taking these people out. Where SDI is concerned, a tremendous amount is at stake. In return for the Thatcher government's early support of the Star Wars program, the Reagan administration promised a number of extremely lucrative SDI contracts to the British defense industry. Hundreds of millions of US dollars the struggling British economy at that time could little afford to lose. Britain traditionally has one of the finest defense industries in the world. Their annual overseas weapons sales amount to more than 250 billion. The publicity from a Star Wars spy scandal could have seriously cut into the profits. It would appear that only initial promises made to former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher hold the US from cutting its losses and pulling out. A high-ranking American source was quoted in the Sunday Times saying, if this happened in Greece, Brazil, Spain, or Argentina, we'd be all over them like a glove. The Thatcher government's PR problem was the scandal centered around Marconi Company Limited, Britain's largest electronics defense contractor. 7 Marconi scientists are among the dead. Marconi, which employs 50,000 workers worldwide, was a subsidiary of Britain's General Electric Company at the time. GEC Managing Director Lord Weinstock launched his own internal investigation. Yet the GEC and the Ministry of Defense still contend that the 22 deaths are coincidental. A Ministry of Defense spokesman said they found no evidence of any sinister links between them. Well, if you did, it would be embarrassing, wouldn't it? So you'd never admit it. It says, however, an article in the British publication The Independent claimed the incidence of self-deletion among Marconi scientists was twice the national average of mentally healthy individuals. Either Marconi was hiring abnormally unstable scientists or something was very, very wrong. 2 deaths brought the issue to light in the fall of '86. Within weeks of each other, 2 London-based Marconi scientists were found dead 100 miles away. In Bristol, both were involved in creating software for a huge computerized Star Wars simulator, the hub of Marconi's SDI program. Both had been working on the simulator just hours before their death, and like others, neither had any apparent reason to check out. Vimal Dajibai was a 24-year-old electronics graduate who worked at Marconi Underwater Systems in Croxley Green. In August 1986, his crumpled body was found lying on the pavement 240 feet below the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol. An inquest was unable to determine whether Dajubai had been pulled off of the bridge or whether he had jumped. There had been no witnesses and the verdict was left open, yet authorities did their best to pin his death on self-infliction. Police testified that Dajubai had been suffering from depression, something his family and friends flatly denied. And he had absolutely no history of personal or emotional problems. Police claimed that the deceased had been drinking with a friend, Hayat Shah, shortly before his death, and a bottle of wine and 2 used paper cups had been found in his car. That's all the proof you need, isn't it, folks? It says, yet forensic tests were never done on the auto. And those who knew Vimal, including Shah, said that he'd never taken a drink of alcohol in his life. What a sloppy fake setup that they put together. Investigating journalists found discrepancies in other evidence. A police report noted puncture marks on his left buttock after his fall from the bridge, explains Tony Collins, who covered the story for Britain's Computer News magazine. Apparently, this was the reason his funeral was halted seconds before his cremation was to take place. Members of the family were told the body was to be taken away for a second post-mortem to be done by a top Home Office pathologist. That's not normal. Then a few months later, police held a press conference and announced it hadn't been a puncture mark. After all, it was a wound caused by a bone fragment. Nothing to see here, folks. I find it very difficult to reconcile the initial coroner's report with what the police were saying a few months later. Officials didn't fare any better with the second Bristol fatality. Police virtually tripped over themselves to come up with a motive for the apparent and unusually violent self-checking out of Ashad Sharif. Sharif was a 26-year-old computer analyst who worked on the Marconi Defense System headquarters in Stanmore, Middlesex. On October 28, 1986, he allegedly drove to a public park not far from where Dajabi had died He tied one end of a nylon cord around a tree and the other around his neck. He then got back into his Audi 80 automatic, stepped on the gas, and sped off, decapitating himself. Are you kidding me? Marconi initially claimed that Sharif was only a junior employee and that he had nothing to do with Star Wars. Co-workers stated otherwise. At the time of his death, Sharif was apparently about to be promoted. Also, Ashad had reportedly worked for a time in Vimal Dajibai's section. The inquest determined that Sharif's death was a self-started thing. Investigating officers maintained that the man had done it because he had been jilted by an alleged, I guess, romance. Sharif was said to have been depressed over a broken romance, Tony Collins explains, but the woman police unofficially say was his lover contends she was only his landlady when he was working for British Aerospace in Bristol. She's married, has 3 children, and is deeply religious. The possibility of the two having an affair seems highly unlikely, especially since Sharif had a fiancée in Pakistan. His family told me he was genuinely in love with her. Police suddenly switched stories. They began to say Sharif had been deeply in love with the woman he was engaged to, and that he had done this to himself because another woman was pressuring him to call off the marriage. Authorities claimed that he'd found a taped message in Sharif's car, tantamount to a note letting them know what he was doing. On it, officers said he admitted to having an affair, thus bringing shame on his family. Family members who heard the tape said that it actually gave no indication as to why he might have wanted to do this, and his family was told by the coroner it was not in their best interest to attend the inquest. Cover up. It's also been almost impossible to get information about deaths that should be in the public domain. I've been given false names or incorrect spellings. I've not been told where inquests have taken place. It's been made very difficult for me to try and track down details of these cases. In the Sharif case, 2 facts stand out. Ashad had no history of depression, and there was absolutely no reason for him to be in Bristol. A widely held theory among the establishment press is that the mysterious deaths are stress-related accidents or personal decisions. Such theories might not be off the mark. According to a high-ranking British government official, for the past year and a half, the Ministry of Defence has been secretly investigating Marconi on allegations of defence contract fraud, overcharging the government, bribing officials, and the extensive probe has apparently required most of the MOD's investigative resources, conceivably reaching as far as the Marconi subcontractors and into MOD research facilities, such as the Royal Military College of Science and the Royal Air Force Research Centre. Almost all of the dead scientists were associated with one or more of these establishments. If Marconi employees were being forced by management to perform or cover up illegal activities, it may be that the stress did indeed get to them. In America, there are considerable incentives for people to blow the whistle if they're being asked to perform illegal acts, like ripping off the government. A confidential source in Parliament explains, however, in this country, there have been perhaps 20 people who have blown the whistle, and none of them have ever worked again. They didn't receive any confirmation. Here, you don't get any recognition. You get threatened with prosecution under the Official Secrets Act. They can fire you. They can take away your home, get you blacklisted. Maybe they'll kill you. It's an impossible position to be placed in. It's quite conceivable that these people could have hurt themselves because they felt terribly ashamed of what they've done. Or did someone do that to them? For that matter, some of the accidents or self-incidents could have been men who had taken bribes but couldn't face the embarrassment of public disclosure. If Marconi was systematically defrauding the government for millions of pounds each year, perhaps an employee stumbled upon incriminating evidence and had to be done away with. It would be easy enough to make it look like an accident, so that basically confirms it. Now there's more. Consider the peculiar death of Peter Peepel. Found dead beneath his car in the garage of his Oxfordshire home, Peepel, 46, worked for the Royal Military College of Science, a world authority on communications technology, electronic surveillance, and target detection. Peepel was an expert at using computers to process signals emitted by metals, and his work reportedly included testing titanium for its resistance to explosives. On the night of February the 22nd, 1987, he spent an enjoyable evening out with his wife Maureen and their friends, and when they returned home, Maureen went straight to bed, leaving Peter to put the car away. When Maureen woke up the next morning, she discovered that Peter had not come to bed. She went looking for him, and when she reached the garage, she noticed the door was closed, but the car's engine was running. She found her husband lying on his back beneath the car, his mouth directly below the tailpipe. She pulled him into the open air, but he was already dead. Initially, Maureen thought that her husband's death was an accident. She presumed he'd gotten under the car to investigate a knocking he'd heard driving home the night before and that he'd gotten stuck, but the light fixture in the garage was broken and Peter hadn't been carrying a flashlight. Police had their own suspicions. A constable, the same height and weight as Peter, found it impossible to crawl under the car when the garage door was closed. He found it impossible to close the door when he was under the car. Carbon deposits from inside the garage door showed the engine had been running only a short period of time, yet Miss People had found the body almost 7 hours after she'd gone to bed. The coroner's inquest could not determine whether the death was a homicide, a suicide, or by accident. Damn it, I said it. According to Maureen People, Peter had no reason to do this. They had no marital or financial problems. Peter loved his job. He just got a big raise. And according to colleagues, he was exhibiting no signs of stress. We never may know what's killing these scientists, but everyone has a theory. The National Forum Foundation, a conservative Washington, D.C. think tank, believes the deaths are the work of European-based left-wing terrorists, such as those who took credit for gunning down a West German bureaucrat who had negotiated the Star Wars contracts. The group also claims that the July 1986 bombing death of a research director from the Siemens Company, a high-tech West German electronics firm, they have yet to take credit for any of the scientists. A more outrageous theory suggests that the Russians have developed an electromagnetic death ray, we've heard about those on the channel before, which they're using to drive the British scientists to hurt themselves. A supermarket tabloid contends the ultra-thin waves emitted by the device interfere with a person's brain waves, causing violent mood shifts and including near-fatal depression. The Soviets have apparently developed such a weapon. Why waste it on 22 British defense workers? I don't think that's a waste if they really want to get them secrets and get these technologists out of the way. It says, were the scientists victims of a corrupt defense industry? Have they been espionage pawns? Are the deaths nothing more than an extraordinary coincidence? Guess the dossier of death. So this is all of the people. So auto accident. Professor Keith Bowden, 45, computer scientist, Essex University. In March 1982, his car plunged off a bridge into an abandoned rail yard. It was listed as an accidental death. Missing person. Some of these guys are missing. Just like Neil McCasland. Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Godley, 49, defense expert, head of work study unit at the Royal Military College of Science. Godley disappeared in 1983, April. His father bequeaths him more than $60,000 with the proviso that he claim it be in 1987. He never showed up and is presumed dead. Shotgun blast. Roger Hill, 49, radar designer and draftsman, Marconi. In March 1985, he allegedly used a shotgun on himself at the family home. Death leap. Jonathan Walsh, 29, digital communications expert assigned to British telecom secret Martlesham Heath research facility and to GEC, Marconi's parent firm. In November 1985, Walsh allegedly fell from his hotel room while working on a British telecom project in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, Africa. He'd expressed a fear for his life. Verdict still in question. Oh, really? Another death leap. Vimal Dajibai, 24, computer software engineer, worked on guidance system for Tigerfish torpedo, Marconi underwater systems in August 1986. His crumpled remains were found 240 feet below the Clifton Suspension Bridge, and the death hasn't even been listed as a self-decision. Decapitation. Ashad Sharif, 26, computer analyst, Marconi Defense Systems, in October 1986 in Bristol. He tied one end of a rope around a tree and the other around his neck and drove off in his car at high speed. That one's insane. Suffocation. Richard Pooh, computer consultant for the MOD, Ministry of Defense. In January 1987, he was found dead, wrapped head to toe in rope that was tied 4 times around his neck. The coroner listed his death as an accidental sexual experiment gone left. Asphyxiation. John Britton, Ministry of Defense, tank batteries expert, Royal Military College of Science. In January 1987, he was found dead in a parked car in his garage. Engine still running. Accidental death verdict. Drug overdose. Victor Moore, 46, design engineer, Marconi Space Systems. In February 1987, he was found dead of a drug overdose, and that is listed as his own decision. Asphyxiation. Peter Peepel, 46, scientist, Royal Military College of Science. In February 1989, he was found dead beneath his car, face near the tailpipe, in the garage of his Oxfordshire home. Death was due to carbon monoxide poisoning. Although the test showed the engine had only been running a short time, foul play has not been ruled out. Asphyxiation. Edwin Skeels, 43, engineer from Marconi. In February 1987, Skeels was found dead in his car, victim of carbon monoxide poisoning. A hose led from the exhaust pipe, and his death was listed as his own cause. Auto accident. David Sands, satellite projects manager. Easham's, a Marconi sister company. Although up for promotion, in 1987, Sands drove a car filled with gasoline cans into the brick wall outside an abandoned cafe, and he was killed accidentally. Foul play has not been ruled out. Auto accident. Stuart Gooding, age 23, postgraduate research student from the Royal Military College of Science. In April 1987, he died in a mysterious car wreck in Cyprus while the college was holding military exercises on the island. Verdict, accidental death. It was an accident. Another accident, auto accident. George Kuntis, experienced systems analyst at British Polytechnic. In April 1987, Kuntis drowned after his BMW plunged into the Mersey River in Liverpool. His death was ruled as a misadventure, just a little misadventure. Suffocation. Mark Wisner, age 24, software engineer at the Ministry of Defense Experimental Station for Combat Aircraft. In April 1997, Wisner was found dead in his home with a plastic bag over his head. At the inquest, his death was ruled as an accident due to a sexual experiment gone awry. These guys are freaky. They're freaked out on the Star Wars, right? Auto accident. Michael Baker, 22, digital communications expert, Plessy Defense Systems. In 1987, Baker's BMW crashed through a road barrier, killing the driver. Verdict, misadventure again. Heart attack, Frank Jennings, 60, electronic weapons engineer for Plessy. In June 1987, he allegedly dropped dead of a heart attack. No inquest was held. Death leap, Russell Smith, 23, lab technician at Atomic Energy Research Establishment. In January 1988, Smith's mangled body was found halfway down a cliff in Cornwall. Verdict, that was his own decision. Asphyxiation, Trevor Knight, 52, computer engineer, Marconi Space and Defense System. March 1988, Knight was found dead in his car, asphyxiated by fumes from a hose attached to the tailpipe. The death was ruled his own decision. Electrocution, John Ferry, 60, assistant marketing director for Marconi. In August 1988, Ferry was found dead in a company-owned apartment. The stripped leads of an electrical cord in his mouth. Foul play was not ruled out. These are absolutely bizarre. Electrocution, Alistair Beckham, 50, software engineer, Plessy. In August 1988, his lifeless body was found in the garden shed behind his house. Bare wires which ran to a live main were wrapped around his chest. Now, a note was found. Police have not ruled out foul play. Asphyxiation, Andrew Hall, 33, engineering manager, British Aerospace. In September 1988, Hall was found dead in his car, asphyxiated by fumes from a hose that was attached to the tailpipe. Friends said he was well liked and he had everything to live for, but the verdict was he did it to himself. And for some reason, there is a random picture of a UFO at the bottom of this document, just if it wasn't chilling enough. 22 people. And it's like back in the 80s, they probably didn't have the high-tech methods to take people out like they do now. So they're out here plugging them into fucking electrical cords, putting hose pipes from the back of their cars, laying them down next to that. Give me a break. This is exactly what's going on now. It's exactly the same. It's been going on in the 80s. It's exactly what's going on now. And I think it is a hostile foreign government murdering scientists. I ain't going to say too much else. You heard you heard everything, right? You can make up your own minds. I know you guys are smart. We see what's going on here, okay? This is a giant international scandal. And I tell you what, we were covering this before everyone.
A retired Air Force general walked out of his New Mexico home, leaving behind his glasses and every device that could track him, and he vanished with no explanation and no trace. A seasoned hiker set out for a hike to the summit of Mount Waterman with two other experienced hikers. One of her companions saw her wave to him on the trail, and moments later, she had disappeared without a trace. Another woman in New Mexico left behind her keys, wallet, and car, walked away from her home, and vanished without a trace. Both her cell phones were found to be factory reset. A young father was killed on his doorstep in Brookline, Massachusetts. A man living in a remote area of Antelope Valley in California was shot dead on his front porch. In Ohio, a man killed his wife and a coworker before taking his own life, making sure it was captured by a surveillance camera. In Massachusetts, a man was mysteriously missing for 3 months before his remains were found in a lake. These cases all have circumstances and facts that are their own. And at first glance, none of them seem to be connected. None of them seem to have anything to do with each other. Why would they? However, when you start laying the names down side by side, the connections begin to float to the surface. And the coincidences stop looking like coincidences. These incidents did not happen over the course of many years. They happened throughout 2025 and into the early months of 2026. Today, we are going to start to talk about 10 people. 3 are currently missing, the rest are dead. And the deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another true crime video. I am excited to talk to you about this topic today because in some loose way I've been tracking these cases and putting these pieces together without even knowing I was putting pieces together. And I've been doing this since late December of 2025. But before we dive into that world, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video. This video is sponsored by June's Journey, and honestly, this one feels very on brand for us because if you love a good mystery, and I know you do, you might actually really enjoy this. It's a hidden object detective game set in the 1920s, which already has that whole moody, glamorous, vintage vibe. Think Great Gatsby. And you play as June Parker, who's trying to solve her sister's murder while uncovering all these layered family secrets. So it's not just random gameplay, there's an actual story unfolding as you go, and every scene you complete gives you more clues. And what I like about it is it's one of those games you can pick up when you want to unwind, but it still keeps you mentally engaged. You're scanning these really detailed, beautiful scenes, looking for hidden objects that a lot of them are very, of the time of the 1920s. And so sometimes I'll come across an object I've never heard of before and I'll look it up and then I learn something. And it kind of feels like you're piecing together evidence at your own pace, like a much calmer version of what we usually talk about here. I love to grab my phone and play a little June's Journey at the end of a long day where my brain has been occupied by all of the darkness of the world. It's such a gorgeous and stimulating escape. Instead of just mindlessly scrolling on social media, I'm engaging my brain and retreating to a vivid and mysterious world. But what's really fun right now is that they're doing a special Agatha Christie collaboration, which, let's be honest, feels like it was made for true crime people. You actually get to living in a non-reality at this point. But the people I talked about in the intro of this video, they are connected through multiple things. They're connected through geographic clusters in the United States where military, aerospace intelligence, and advanced research activities are heavily concentrated and interconnected. A networked ecosystem of military bases, labs, contractors, and universities that all feed into each other. These people all worked in fields that focused on things like space systems, weapons development, nuclear energy, advanced materials, surveillance, classified programs. And what happened to all of these people got various levels of news coverage as the time went on. Surface level explanations of what the cases were, nothing that went too deep, and always saying like, hey, we don't really know what happened here, but we're still investigating. Until the disappearance of General William Neal McCasland on February 27th, 2026, when major news networks began reporting on his case, as well as its potential connections to some of the other cases. News Nation's Russ Coulthart has called McCasland's disappearance a grave national security crisis for the United States of America, because McCasland is, quote, a man with some of the most sensitive secrets of the United States in his head, end quote. So it is with the disappearance of General William McCasland that we will start. On the morning of February 27th, 2026, sometime after 10 a.m., 67-year-old William Neal McCasland left his home in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and apparently set out on foot, leaving behind his prescription glasses, cell phone, and wearable devices. His wife, Susan, returned home from an appointment around noon, and she reported him missing at 3:07 p.m. Now, the only things that Susan could identify as being missing from the home that she shared with her husband was his wallet, his hiking boots, and a .38 caliber revolver with a leather holster. Now, it has been reported that McCasland is an experienced hiker and an avid outdoorsman, and he lives at 1701 Quail Run Court, a cul-de-sac in Sandia Heights. In this photo, you can see that the foothills of the Cibola National Forest were basically in his backyard, and McCasland was known for enjoying hiking and cycling in the Sandia Mountains, which is located in that area behind his home. Law enforcement in this case, they did the things that they usually did. They looked for him. They asked neighbors to submit any security camera footage they had of the time period where McCasland was believed to have left home. They asked anyone who was in the Sandia Mountains on February 27th or 28th to check their GoPro and camera footage. And they created a dedicated evidence portal where users could upload their videos and pictures. Investigators have canvassed more than 700 homes and have searched a vast stretch of terrain using dogs, drones, ground teams, and helicopters. The police also issued a silver alert, citing concern for McCasland's safety due to his medical issues. Now, this is weird, and I'm not the only one who thought it was weird. A lot of people, including Ross Coulthart, have said, this is weird. Why did they do this? So in New Mexico, the criteria for a silver alert applies to someone who is over the age of 50, and they have to have a clear indication that the individual has an irreversible deterioration of intellectual faculties. That's not something I made up. I'm going to put it up on the screen. You'll be able to see that is the criteria for a silver alert in New Mexico. And this is odd considering who General William McCasland is and was, and the fact that he was an incredibly intelligent and active man who had just gone on a 60-mile bike ride the week before he vanished into thin air. So during a news conference on March 16th, law enforcement said the silver alert remained in effect, and it had been issued because McCasland previously reported that he was experiencing a mental fog. But Lieutenant Kyle Woods of the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office made sure to clarify that investigators did not believe McCasland was cognitively impaired at the time of his disappearance.
I'll clarify it with this. There's no indication, and we are not putting forward, that Mr. McCasland was disoriented, confused. Arguably, he would still be the most intelligent person in the room that any of us would be in. Highly intelligent, highly capable, but that information was given to us early on, and out of an abundance of caution, we escalated to a silver alert to try to garner as much public attention as possible to try to help locate him as soon as possible.
And yeah, that is just odd to me. It's off because, as I said, a silver alert goes out when the person has an irreversible deterioration of intellectual faculties. And so somebody, most likely General McCasland's wife, Susan, had told the police that McCasland had a mental fog months before he went missing. And I just don't know if that would qualify for that. I don't know if having a mental fog or saying you had a mental fog months before you disappeared would qualify as your mental state or your faculties deteriorating irreversibly. I mean, I had a mental fog yesterday, and I'll probably have another one tomorrow, maybe even later today. But let's listen to Susan McCasland's call to 911 when she reported her husband missing. And she'll introduce herself with a different last name. That would be her maiden name. And I don't know if she changed her name when she got married or if she kept her maiden name, but I'm just calling her Susan McCasland so you understand that I'm referring to Susan, General McCasland's wife.
Hi, April. My name is Susan Wilkerson. My husband is missing. Okay. And it's been about 3 hours, and I have some indication that he must have planned not to be found. He's left his phone. He changed his clothes into I don't know what. I think he's on foot. All of our cars and bicycles are in the garage. I left for a doctor's appointment at about 11:10, and he was here at that time at the house. And I got back from that at noon, and he was gone. He turned it off and left it behind, which seems kind of deliberate because he's always got his phone. He has a smartwatch. I don't know if that's with him or not.
Has he ever done this before?
Never. Nothing even remotely like it. He's a retired Air Force Major General. He's very responsible, but he's also facing some medical issues.
Do you have any video at your home?
No.
Has he been diagnosed with any mental disorders or anything like that?
Well, we've been seeing a doc for both physical and mental in terms of anxiety, short-term memory loss, lack of sleep. The same doc I went to see today.
Does he carry any weapons on him?
Well, not generally. He does have a gun safe, and I went to look in the gun safe to see if anything was missing, but I couldn't tell if anything was. He has quite a number of pistols and rifles. Other than saying if his brain and body keep deteriorating, he didn't want to live like that. But it seemed to me that was just a, man, I hate how this is going kind of thing, because I told him, yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Okay. We're going to send some deputies up to talk to you, see if we can search a little bit and see what's going on, okay?
Sure.
Susan said it seemed deliberate, right? Her husband leaving, walking away from the house on foot, leaving behind any of his devices that could help locate him. This must have been something he planned to do, and he planned to not be found. Now, Susan also does suggest that maybe McCasland had been depressed because of his brain fog and mental deterioration, but she also says that she doesn't think that he took his own life. It was more of a regular, like, hey, I'm aging, this sucks, I don't like this, especially for somebody like McCasland, who, as we'll come to find, he was very intelligent, brilliant, illustrious career. So yeah, I could see somebody like that having a hard time getting older and dealing with just the regular cognitive decline that comes along with that. And even if General McCasland was like, oh, I've got some anxiety and brain fog, I want to end it all, which why would he do that? But even if he wanted to do that, wouldn't he still wear his prescription glasses to get to the place that he planned to go in order to end it all? I wear prescription glasses, and it's not one of those things where it's like, oh, I can't read without my glasses. It's like, I'm probably not going to go hiking in the wilderness, in the mountains, in the forest without my glasses because I need to see things, right? So it doesn't make any sense. All right. And I believe at this point, law enforcement has said, hey, we don't think that General McCasland took his own life or intended to harm himself. Like, as far as our investigation has brought us, we have not found any sign of that. It was also reported that McCasland had a second home in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, about 35 miles north of the New Mexico border and 200 miles from his New Mexico home. It was also reported that McCasland had a second home in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, about 35 miles north of the New Mexico border and 200 miles from his New Mexico home. So I guess police were like, well, maybe he went there to hide out, whatever. Obviously, he couldn't walk there on foot. He could, but not anytime soon. It'd take him a long time. So the investigators did search there, and then they reported that they found hiking boots. And I'm not sure why they told us that, because if I had two homes and I liked hiking and both of my homes were located in places where there might be mountains to hike in, I might have two pairs of hiking boots. Like if I had a second home, I can afford to have a second pair of hiking boots. But they did. They told us, oh, we found hiking boots at his home. Not the same hiking boots, just hiking boots. So on March 7th, 8 days after he disappeared, a gray U.S. Air Force sweatshirt was found a little over a mile from McCasland's home. Now, this sweatshirt, it's reported constantly when you read the story, but it hasn't even been confirmed to belong to General William McCasland. Yes, he was in the Air Force, but there's no proof or sign that it's his sweatshirt. Outside of that, there has literally been no trace of this man, even though law enforcement has used every search method and tool at their disposal. So why would the disappearance of a retired U.S. Air Force general potentially pose a serious threat to our country's national security? Well, to tell you that, we have to know who William McCasland is and what he's done throughout his very exciting and illustrious life. William McCasland grew up in an Air Force family, the son of Lieutenant William H. McCasland and Robin McCasland. And when he was young, his father was killed in a flying accident, and his mother remarried Lieutenant William R. Casey, another airman. So McCasland attended the United States Air Force Academy. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in astronautical engineering in 1979. He went on to receive a full scholarship from the Hertz Foundation, and he got his master's degree in aeronautical engineering in 1980. After this, McCasland served in the Payload Systems Division with the Secretary of the Air Force of Special Projects at Los Angeles Air Force Base. So I said a lot of things there, and I didn't know what any of it meant, so I obviously had to look into it. So the Secretary of the Air Force Special Projects was actually a highly classified division of the Air Force, responsible for top secret space and reconnaissance programs. Understand, this is not standard Air Force work. This is what they call deep black program territory. So in the US military and the intelligence world, programs fall into a few different categories. Unclassified, meaning, everyone knows. Classified, meaning it's not public knowledge, kept secret, but, the government will still acknowledge it exists if they need to. And then black programs, which are super secret, not publicly acknowledged at all. We're talking advanced weapons systems, experimental aerospace projects, who knows what else. Access to these projects is limited to people with the top secret clearance and who are special access program approved. So we can use context to figure out what kind of super secret stuff William McCasland was working on. He worked in the payload systems division, which you see a lot in like military and government terms, payload. And I had no idea what that meant. It sounds like the most boring word ever, but it basically means he was working on the part of satellites that collect information and do missions. And he was doing this at Los Angeles Air Force Base, which is a space and acquisition hub, which is now home to Space Systems Command. Now, historically, the Los Angeles Air Force Base was the center of satellite development, defense contractor coordination with companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing, and classified space programs. Given all of that, it is very likely that McCasland was working on highly classified satellite programs tied to intelligence collection and or national security infrastructure. And that was just in the early 1980s, because in 1985, McCasland returned to MIT to complete a doctorate in astronautical engineering, where his dissertation was about making complex, flexible aerospace systems smart enough to stabilize themselves and keep working, even if parts of the systems break off or fall apart. So his thesis advisor was Richard Batten. Richard Batten is a legendary aerospace engineer at MIT, best known for helping design the guidance system that got astronauts to the moon during the Apollo program. And if you don't remember, because it's been such a long time, that was back in the 70s. So after this, General McCasland returned to the Los Angeles Air Force Base as an assistant director of the Office of Special Projects. This means he was working inside a top secret Air Force office that handled advanced space and surveillance systems, not just working, but leading major projects, managing teams, and overseeing development. He was involved in the early development of spy satellites, so systems that take images from space, intercept signals, and track activity globally. In 1992, McCasland moved to Buckley Air Force Base in Colorado, where he served as the director of mission planning for the Aerospace Data Facility. Buckley is a major hub for satellite operations, intelligence gathering, and space-based surveillance. And the ADF is a ground station that receives data from satellites in space. So at this point, General McCasland wasn't just collecting data, he was deciding what the satellites should focus on, when they should collect data, how to prioritize different targets, etc. So this moved McCasland from building the satellite systems to using them. He then took a break from this job to attend Air War College at Maxfield Air Force Base, a place for people being groomed for top leadership roles who would be trained on things like military planning, strategy, global conflict, national security. He also the Defense Systems Management College, where he learned how to manage large and complex defense programs with budgets of billions of dollars while working with contractors and overseeing classified projects. And he's going to need that information. He's going to need that education and knowledge later on in life. He then returned to Buckley, where he was put in command of the Aerospace Data Facility. So to put it simply, McCasland was pulled out of his job at the Aerospace Data Facility. He was trained at elite military schools to become a senior leader in charge of very classified secret information. And then he returned to take command of a unit responsible for operating U.S. spy satellite systems. By 1997, McCasland was back at Los Angeles Air Force Base, where he spent the next 3 years as the chief engineer of the Navstar GPS Joint Program Office. So basically Navstar, it's like GPS stuff for military, but also for the private sector, like what our phones use to, get us from place to place. In 2000, McCasland took control of the Space-Based Laser Project Office, meaning he became the person in charge of a program trying to build lasers in space for military use. Now, a space-based laser, I didn't even know we had those. I'm very behind, but we do. It's a laser weapon placed on a satellite designed to track and potentially destroy targets, especially missiles, shortly after launch. So if another country sends a missile towards us, we've got these lasers on satellites. Apparently, they can take them out. In 2001, McCasland moved to Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, where he was appointed commander of the Phillips Research Center. Remember this. So Kirtland is a major Air Force research facility that develops advanced space technology. At this site, McCasland worked on a lot of things: spacecraft technology, laser systems again, and advanced materials. Advanced materials, put a pin in that. In 2005, McCasland was back at the Los Angeles Air Force Base, now the vice commander of the Space and Missile Systems Center. And 2 years later, he was made the director of space acquisition at the Pentagon. So now he's at the Pentagon, okay? Pretty high up Department of Defense stuff. In this role, McCasland helped decide what space systems get built, which companies build them, like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and how a budget consisting of billions of dollars would be spent. In 2009, McCasland moved into the Office of the Secretary of Defense and became Director of Special Programs, the most sensitive classified programs in the US government. I think they call them SAPs, like Special Access Programs. But when you hear people say SAPs or SAP or something like that, that's what they're talking about: Special Access Programs or Special Programs. We're talking advanced weapons that 99.9999999% of people will never get to know about. And even less people will get to know everything about them, because I've come to find that in these Special Access Programs, when you're dealing with such classified information, not one person is going to have all the information for everything about the program. They're going to have like everybody sort of split up, and this guy knows this, and this guy knows this, and this girl knows that. And then when they come together and like give their reports to whoever is reading the reports, then all the information comes together. But very, very, very few people are going to see the full picture. We're also talking experimental technology that the mind cannot even perceive is actually being researched and created there. These special access programs, like weapons that you would maybe see in, futuristic movies, but you'd think, oh, we'll never have that. We probably already do. He also became executive secretary for the Special Access Program Oversight Committee, with full purview of all America's most sensitive and secretive knowledge, capabilities, and programs. In May of 2011, General McCasland left the Pentagon for his final posting, assuming command of the Air Force Research Lab at Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, where he was in charge of multi-billion-dollar budgets for research into advanced and often classified materials, science, and future weapons research across one of the largest scientific centers in the Department of Defense, the Air Force Research Lab. We're going to talk about that a lot. So McCasland oversaw billions of dollars in research in advanced materials, sensors, directed energy, aka lasers, space systems, and future weapons. Now, this specific Air Force base, Wright-Patterson, it also has ties to aliens, extraterrestrials, a topic that has been in the news a lot as of late. Don't roll your eyes or turn off the video. I'm going somewhere with this. You're just going to have to trust me. Stay with me here. So in 1947, something crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. We all know about this. At first, the military said it was a flying disc, and everyone was like, what? And then they quickly changed their story, and they said, no, our bad, we were wrong. It's a weather balloon. It's always a weather balloon. Now, there were a lot of people who didn't believe the weather balloon story. They believed that the wreckage was an alien spacecraft, and that the U.S. military not only recovered a craft that day, but biological material from that crash site. And these recovered materials were transferred from New Mexico to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio for study. Because remember, at the Air Force Base, they have the materials, I think it's called the Materials Directorate or something like that, or directive, but they study and try to replicate advanced materials. So for decades, this story has stayed kind of on the fringe. We talk about it in internet forums. It's labeled a conspiracy theory. Some people are like, maybe, but how could the government lie about it for this long? But there is some evidence to support all of this and kind of bring it away from the fringes. First of all, Wright-Patterson did have facilities for analyzing foreign technology and materials. There are long-standing units whose job it is to take unknown or foreign technology and figure out exactly what it is, how it works, and how to replicate it, how to reverse engineer it, basically. In July of 2023, the U.S. House Oversight Committee held a public hearing on UAPs, right? So unidentified aerial phenomena, which is the same thing as UFOs. We just call it something different now because I guess UFOs got a bad rap. You know, it was like, we don't like UFOs anymore. That sounds kind of cheesy. We're going to call them UAPs now because that's more legitimate. So during the hearing, 3 military veterans testified. David Grush, Ryan Graves, and David Fravor. So David Grush is a former U.S. Air Force major and intelligence officer with the Pentagon's UAP task force, which remember means unidentified aerial phenomena. And he said under oath that the U.S. has operated a multi-decade program to recover and reverse engineer craft of non-human origin. He also claimed that biological material was recovered from Roswell and from other crash sites, and this biological material was not human. He alleged that these programs are hidden from Congress and some are improperly shielded within SAPs, Special Access Programs.
But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the director's briefing staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting a variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Okay, we'll come back to that, but let's return to General William McCasland, who held his position commanding the Air Force Research Lab at Wright-Patterson from May of 2011 until his retirement in October of 2013, I believe. It may have been 2016. I've seen it reported different places, but also keep in mind that he wasn't just really at Wright-Patterson for a few years. He was there longer, but just not in control of that research lab. And also, please understand, when General William McCasland vanished in February of 2026, he was not just some, older retired Air Force general who was playing shuffleboard. He was still very active in his work and in work that directly connected to the United States government and military. So after he retired, McCasland became the director of technology at a place called Applied Technology Associates in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This was an aerospace firm specializing in precision sensing for ground, air, and space applications. ATA would later be absorbed by defense contractor Blue Halo. And in 2025, Blue Halo was acquired by AeroVironment. So ATA, the place where General McCasland went to when he retired, Blue Halo and AeroVironment, they're all kind of the same. These are all defense contractors, companies that build sensors, space payloads, and laser systems for the Department of the Defense, for the government, for the military. So on March 3rd, 2026, AeroVironment announced a $30 million expansion of its New Mexico manufacturing campus at the Sandia Science and Technology Park that would focus on laser systems, space payloads, and advanced defense electronics. And once again, space payloads. Payloads are basically just like the equipment that we send out to space. Yeah, so from what I can tell, payload is a word that describes many things. Like it can be space payload, weapons payload, and basically it just means like if you send like something out into space, everything that's sent out into space, the materials that are sent out to do the job, like collect information or watch things or whatever, that's the payload. So like satellites and things like that. That's basically space payloads. And if you're talking weapons payloads, you're basically talking about like missiles, bombs, stuff like that. It's whatever is being carried out into space or out into war or battle or whatever. So McCasland went from running one of the Air Force's top research labs to operating inside of a network of private companies and organizations that built and influenced the same kinds of technologies that are usually sold to the government and military. So in June of 2019, McCasland also joined the board of trustees for Riverside Research, a nonprofit chartered to advance scientific research for the benefit of the United States government and in the public interest, as an afterthought, I'm sure. However, their biggest customer is hands down the US government. They have a $450 million contract with active defense and intelligence. They do things like machine learning, electromagnetics, plasma physics, intelligence systems, all the same stuff McCasland's been doing since the 80s. So in 2021, General McCasland started DBE Consulting, LLC, and this was a company that advised clients across the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. So at that point, McCasland was giving strategic and technical advice to the government and military. So when he disappeared, he wasn't just a retired general who faded into obscurity and, picked up a hobby of like making toy planes. He was still actively working on important technology and research with the United States government and military. He was just doing it from the private sector. Okay. He wasn't somebody that wouldn't know things, is what I mean. We also need to talk about General McCasland's wife, Susan, who was, and I'm sure still is, an impressive woman in her own right, and she had an illustrious career. She's clearly also very smart, brilliant, knows what she's talking about. So William McCasland married Susan Wilkerson on April 7th, 1985, and at that time, if you remember, McCasland was at MIT finishing his doctorate under Richard Batten. Susan earned her PhD in astrophysics from the University of Arizona in 1979. So like I said, brilliant. The following year, she was actually selected as a NASA mission. Was in Group 9. This is the group famous for producing Sally Ride, the first American woman to travel into space aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger. So being a finalist in that group, and at that time, it meant that Susan was considered top tier because NASA's selection process is extremely competitive, and it especially was back then when it was new and burgeoning. Thousands of people apply. Only a small group is selected as finalists. Susan was one of them. She ultimately was not selected for the mission. Instead, she went into the Air Force where she was commissioned as a lieutenant. And what you will see as Susan goes throughout her career is someone operating at a very high level inside the same defense, space, and intelligence ecosystem as her husband, William McCasland. So by 1984, Susan had been advanced to captain. She held the rank of lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserve. She was a senior scientist at the Air Force Geophysics Lab in Sunspot, New Mexico, and chief of the data recorder branch at Headquarters Space Division. She also worked as the director of advanced studies at the Defense Decimation Program. So the Defense Decimation Program was the secure system that took classified satellite data and delivered it to the military and intelligence community. And working in that program at that place, it meant that Susan was directly involved with sensitive national security intelligence. So after active duty, Susan moved into the private sector. She worked for the Analytics Science Corporation, Boeing, Raytheon, major defense contractors working on aerospace systems, intelligence technology, and military programs. And this is where she was when she married General William McCasland. Susan is not and was never just a military spouse. She had a career that spanned NASA-level science, Air Force intelligence, linked satellite systems, and major defense contractors. So let's fast forward to 2016, when both General McCasland and his wife Susan were technically retired from government and military work. They were working for and in the private sector, still connected to the government and military. And that's the year that WikiLeaks, led by Julian Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, published thousands of hacked emails from the Democratic National Committee. Later that year, WikiLeaks released daily installments of emails from John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. And we're not here to talk about all the political implications. We're not here to talk about anything besides one specific slice of these emails. And that specific slice of emails is cooler than politics because it has to do with extraterrestrials, right? Aliens. Now, John Podesta, I don't know if you knew because I didn't, but he's been a prominent advocate for UAP transparency for over 2 decades. He's consistently pushed for the declassification of government files, along with many others. Podesta has stated that he influenced Hillary Clinton to pledge the release of government UFO records, including those related to Area 51. He wanted her to do that if she were elected. Now, through the leaked emails, we found out that Podesta had communicated with someone called Edgar Mitchell several times throughout 2015 and 2016. Edgar Mitchell was a former NASA astronaut, naval officer, and scientist who's best known for being one of the few humans to ever walk on the moon. He flew on the Apollo 14 mission. I think he's either 6 or 7 to walk on the moon. I think it was 7, actually. I think he was the 7th person. I don't know exactly. But before NASA, Mitchell was a U.S. Navy test pilot. He had a PhD in aeronautics and astronautics, and he was highly trained in space systems engineering and navigation. All right. So he's no joke. Once again, not a crazy person, an intelligent person, an educated person. He knows his shit when it comes to, space and rockets and being an astronaut. Okay, so Edgar Mitchell goes to the moon in 1971. And while he walked on the moon, he claims he quietly conducted ESP experiments. He wanted to see if a person in space could mentally send or receive information from someone on Earth, right? So using Zener cards, we've talked about Zener cards before. We talked about them in the Gateway program video we did this past October. But for anybody who doesn't know or didn't see that video, they're basically just flashcards with different shapes and symbols on them. So Mitchell and some pre-selected people on Earth, they looked at their cards, and Mitchell tried to guess what symbol the people on Earth were seeing. And after the mission, Mitchell said that the results were better than random chance. And he said, in his view, this meant that some form of ESP might be real, that it might be, valid. And he was using people that were already psychically trained. I believe in this, unofficial study that he did, there were a few people back on Earth who weren't officially trained in being a psychic or didn't have that gift or hadn't, expressed it before, but there were people who had, what they claimed to be a psychic gift. And what we're talking about here is remote viewing. So Edgar Mitchell later said that his experience in space deeply affected him, not necessarily the ESP experiment, but just being in space in general, seeing the Earth from the moon, all of these things. And this led him to become more interested in things like consciousness, and it eventually led him to found the Institute of Noetic Sciences, focused on consciousness and human potential. He wrote books. He was really into thinking and feeling like the human brain and the human soul and what we are is capable of so much more than we know, and he wanted to tap into that. So after the Apollo 14 mission, Mitchell described having what he called an overview effect. He said that seeing Earth from space made him feel a deep interconnectedness and also made him feel that life might not be limited to Earth. Now, he said very plainly, I never saw any aliens. I never saw anything that suggested something was there on the moon or out in space. I never saw anything. I just felt that. I felt that, hey, I'm in space. There's the Earth. We can't be the only ones out here, which I think a lot of us can understand. Edgar Mitchell later claimed that people he trusted, especially those connected to military and intelligence circles, told him that the U.S. had recovered non-human craft. Now, Mitchell also happened to grow up in New Mexico, near the site of the Roswell incident, and he said that people in that area believed something unusual happened. They always believed it. They saw things. And he later came to believe that the official explanation didn't tell the full story.
Well, it isn't just government. It is the classic cabal of people who want to control things. And it's bigger than government. It's a military-industrial complex that Eisenhower talked about. And learning how to break that down, learning to get it opened up so that we really have free flow of information is a major problem at this point.
But why do you think this military complex is so intense? Is it control?
Profit motive.
Oh, it's all profit.
I imagine it's rooted in the profit motive.
It's so
and controlling these types of technologies.
Yeah, because they'll lose that control if they acknowledge that there's...
Essentially, yes.
No, it's
certainly not our political form in our government. It's deeper than that.
So Edgar Mitchell is emailing John Podesta, and he claimed in the emails that extraterrestrials were real, they were peaceful, and they were mainly concerned with nuclear weapons, which I think we all are. Now, one specific email was requesting a meeting between Edgar Mitchell and John Podesta, and it said, quote, as John is aware, more than 20 countries, including the Vatican, have released top secret papers discussing extraterrestrial incidents on Earth over many years. The U.S. has not participated in disclosure yet. We work with specific ETI from a contiguous universe. They are nonviolent and in complete obedience to God. Our ETI's connection to zero-point energy is obvious, that their purpose is to guide Edgar's international Quantrix science team to apply their zero-point energy research for humanity, to move away from the use of fossil fuels, which are so deleterious to our fragile planet, end quote. So that was a lot of words, but this email is stating that humans are interacting with extraterrestrial intelligence who come from another dimension or parallel reality. So that's also always constantly a question that people have, like, are these what we know as aliens? I keep saying aliens because saying extraterrestrial is very hard and weird in your mouth, but are these aliens, or what we know of as aliens, or think we know of as aliens, are they from another planet in our universe, or are they from a completely different dimension or parallel reality? That is a question that a lot of people are asking. Even still, now we're hearing it from members of Congress where they're like, yeah, there's something out there. We just don't know where it's from or what it is. And Mitchell's email is saying that these non-human intelligence forms, they're connected to zero-point energy, and they understand and use advanced systems, and they're trying to guide humankind and human researchers to develop similar technology for the sake of the planet Earth. So zero-point energy is basically, I guess, a clean form of energy. It's the tiny amount of energy that still exists in empty space, even when everything is as cold and inactive as possible. And Edgar Mitchell, along with others, have suggested that if zero-point energy could be controlled, it might provide massive clean energy that could power the world, power space travel, including advanced propulsion systems, like the rockets that take astronauts to the moon. It's worth noting that John Podesta did not ignore Edgar Mitchell. He didn't dismiss him. He didn't, act like he was crazy. He was very open to talking with Mitchell about these ideas and theories. So how does this tie back to General McCasland? Because it does. Because we also see in the leaked emails that an invitation was sent to McCasland by John Podesta, a meeting scheduled for Monday, January 25th, 2016. And CC'd on that email was somebody named Tom DeLonge, who we're going to talk about, and someone else named Rob Weiss. Rob Weiss was the executive vice president and general manager of Lockheed Martin. Actually, Lockheed Martin's advanced development program, Skunk Works. Also CC'd on that email was Major General Carey, an Air Force general who was relieved of command of the 20th Air Force in 2013, after a misconduct incident during a U.S.-Russia nuclear security exercise. Okay, now here's what's important to also notice, is that General William McCasland's wife, Susan Wilkerson, she also received this invitation from John Podesta about this meeting. And she responded to the Podesta meeting, which was about UAP disclosure, from her own email address. What I'm trying to show you is Susan in her own right was considered somebody who would have access to top secret government information, somebody who had a brilliant enough mind to understand things, had something to offer to the conversation. She was not lumped in to General McCasland's invitation. Susan was also, it appears to be, involved in some way in higher levels of government and military, and invited to talk about things like aliens. Okay, so who's Tom DeLonge? Because I mentioned that he was also CC'd on that email. In 2017, Tom DeLonge launched the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, whose mission it was to bring together former government officials, scientists, and intelligence figures to study UAPs, also to develop advanced technology and push for disclosure. So in late 2017, To the Stars Academy released 3 U.S. Navy UAP videos. all of the videos came from U.S. Navy aircraft systems. The first was taken in 2004, and it's known as FLIR, and it shows a white oval-shaped object with no wings and no visible propulsion. Pilot David Fravor, who, remember, I said he testified in front of Congress, he said the object dropped from high altitude to sea level instantly. It moved erratically, and it reacted to Fravor's own movements because Fravor was flying a plane. In 2015, the gimbal video was taken, and it shows a dark object in infrared that appears to rotate or tilt midair.
Dude, there's a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My God. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not an LNS though, is it? It's not. It is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like, look at that thing. It's rotating.
Another video taken in 2015 is called Go Fast, and it shows a small object moving very, very fast over the ocean.
One thing about your brother. Oh, woohoo! They're shooting to Can you box moving target? No, I took an auto charge. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Oh, let's cry.
These 3 videos were later confirmed as being authentic by the Pentagon. So the Pentagon confirmed, yes, that came from our, Air Force or our Navy planes. And yes, these videos are not doctored or edited. These are real. And that's the moment that Tom DeLonge became a serious figure in the UAP conversation. But who was Tom DeLonge before that, right? Because weird, he pops up out of nowhere. Actually, he co-founded the band Blink-182 in the early 1990s. He achieved massive success with that band, became a mainstream celebrity. But even then, Tom DeLonge was obsessed with UFOs. In the early 2000s, his interest deepened as he began doing more reading, more researching, and he started expressing his belief that governments were hiding advanced aerospace technology. In 2006, Tom DeLonge actually formed another band, Angels and Airwaves. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it slaps. The music actually showed Tom's evolution and his way that he was changing how he thought. It was more space themed and deeper and existential. It's very cool. So at that time, Tom DeLonge began expressing that he felt UFOs were not just random flying objects in the air or strange things that people sometimes thought they saw. He felt that, extraterrestrials, UAPs, they were something that had been interacting with humanity over long periods of time and maybe influencing us in deeper ways. Now, around 2013, 2014, Tom DeLonge began reaching out to people in military and intelligence, people who had contacts and connections in aerospace. And in 2015, he left Blink-182 to focus more on UFO research and disclosure. And then in 2015 and 2016, Tom DeLonge claims he met with Pentagon officials, intelligence personnel, and aerospace figures.
Hillary Clinton was running for presidency against, I guess it was against Trump, and John Podesta was her campaign manager.
Okay.
At the time, he was also senior advisor to Obama. So I was holding conversations with Podesta to get to Obama, and I had 2 multi-star generals from Space Command and the head of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, that Skunk Works built Area 51, their elite engineering division. I had them all on this emails, and we're setting up these conference calls and stuff. Well, Hillary Clinton's campaign got hacked by the Russians, WikiLeaks, and it outed all this shit about Podesta and her. And what happened with that was when all these news journalists were pouring through WikiLeaks to see what spilled from Hillary's campaign. They found these fucking emails with me and Podesta talking to these generals about UFOs. So Wall Street Journal threw that onto the Wall Street Journal. And then I was like, fuck, I'm fucked. And I'm like out there like fucking erasing computers and doing all this different, I didn't know what to do. And at that time, all these other government people that came out.
Okay, so you heard Tom DeLonge say he was talking to 2 multi-star generals and the head of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. And for a while, everyone was kind of like, oh, that Tom DeLonge guy is full of shit. Like, the head of Skunk Works isn't going to talk to him. These, legitimate generals aren't going to talk to him. But the Podesta emails not only prove this, but also kind of start the story and the narrative that one of those generals was William McCasland, which by this point, there's no doubt that it was. There's no doubt that Tom DeLonge, who was pushing for UAP disclosure and trying to find out more about, extraterrestrial life and what the government's hiding, there's no doubt that Tom DeLonge was working with and had talked to General William McCasland. So let's now go to a 2017 interview between Tom DeLonge and George Knapp of Coast to Coast AM. So in this article, Tom said that he had an opportunity to go to an event. He said, quote, the most classified and the most advanced group of engineers and scientists that work within the military industrial complex work under one specific group. And it's a very, very quiet group. But for the first time, they were doing an event where family members can come and not go in the buildings, but at least celebrate in the parking lot what their loved ones do during the day. And they asked me, would you come up? And because I knew this one individual that had told me to be really careful, he goes, hey, look, this is a way for you to come up and see a little bit about what we're doing. And I said, oh my God, I would love to. And he said, do you want to come and introduce the head of the company to the crowd? And I said, I will if I get to sit with him for 5 minutes. I don't know why I said that. I just knew that this was an opportunity that guys like me would kill for because I knew exactly who this group of engineers were. I knew exactly what they do. So in this article, in the passage I just read you, Tom DeLonge is talking about Skunk Works, right? The secretive elite division of Lockheed Martin, the ones that design and build some of the most advanced and often classified aircraft and technologies in the world. So apparently, whoever was talking to Tom and asking, do you want to introduce the head of the company? And Tom was like, yeah, I get 5 minutes with him. This guy was like, you can't talk about UFOs. Like, if that's what you're planning to do, because Tom DeLonge's probably like me and everybody knows he can't be in, civil society because we'll start talking about UFOs and the Epstein files. He's like, you can't do it. You'll get kicked out. Now, Tom says that he does talk to the head guy and he has to go through all this advanced, 4 layers of security. And then they're in a room and they're talking. And one person apparently did a bunch of research on Tom and knew that he was into that subject. So halfway through the conversation, this person says, quote, so what about all the conspiracy stuff that you're into? End quote. And Tom says now he's being eyeballed by 3 very important people. And he's totally, caught at this point. And he's like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? So he tried to talk his way out of it. And then in comes the head of the company, the big dude. Tom says that when the guy comes in, he feels like this is his opportunity to kind of bring up UFOs and aliens, even though he was told not to. And he told the head guy, like, oh, you came in at a very interesting part of the conversation. This person brought up the whole UFO issue with me. I just want you to know that I don't plan on treating that disrespectfully with this project. Because Tom DeLonge of To the Stars Academy and Skunk Works are at this point in talks about doing some project, which will later come to find out, according to Skunk Works, it was possibly a documentary. And Tom's like, I'm not going to be, treating that disrespectfully with this project. And the head guy says, quote, we cannot be involved with anything that has anything to do with that subject, especially since there has been absolutely no evidence whatsoever that it exists. End quote. And Tom's like, man, that killed me. I'm cut off right there. My heart's racing. And I'm like, what do I do? Okay, so Skunk Works, like I said, has confirmed Tom DeLonge's connection to them. In a statement that they gave to the War Zone, they said, quote, Tom DeLonge reached out to Skunk Works with interest in collaborating on a documentary focused on secret machines and advanced development projects. Multiple members of the Skunk Works team met with DeLonge to explore his vision for the documentary, as we would with any individual or organization interested in telling the story of Skunk Works and the technologies we've developed. We ultimately decided to not move forward with our participation in the documentary. During this exploration period, DeLonge attended a Skunk Works employee event, end quote. So basically everything Tom DeLonge is saying is true. He went to an employee event. He got to sit down with the head guy of Skunk Works, as well as some other people. And when he brought up aliens, they were like, we're not going to move forward with this, right? That's fine. Maybe it's because they don't think that anything exists. And they're like, hey, we don't want to be involved in some stupid conspiracy theory documentary. Fine. But apparently, Tom DeLonge was also included in a meeting with John Podesta, 2 generals, and the executive vice president and general manager of Skunk Works, Rob Weiss, who was in that position from 2013 to 2018. So at the time that he would have met with Tom DeLonge in 2016, Rob Weiss was in charge of Skunk Works. Ironically, and as these things go, Skunk Works just popped back into the news as I was writing this. It was reported that the CIA used a futuristic new secret technology called Ghost Murmur to find and rescue the 2nd American airman who was shot down in southern Iran. This just happened. Ghost Murmur, who's ever heard of it, right? Apparently, this is the first time they've used it. I don't know if I believe that. But anyways, Ghost Murmur, it detects the electromagnetic signature of a human heartbeat from long distances away, in this case, 40 miles away. And this system uses quantum magnetometry with artificial intelligence to separate the pulse from the environmental noise, background noise. A source familiar with the operation, probably somebody who works for Skunk Works, allegedly, just my opinion, but if you're familiar with the operation, you're either in, military or you work for the company that made Ghost Murmur. They told the New York Post, quote, "It's like hearing a voice in a stadium, except the stadium is 1,000 square miles of desert. In the right conditions, if your heart is beating, we will find you. The name is deliberate. Murmur is a clinical term for a heart rhythm. Ghost refers to finding someone who, for all practical purposes, has disappeared." End quote. I don't like General McCasland, somebody who's just disappeared in like a desert area, like General McCasland. Ghost Murmur was developed by Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, and it has been reported that the desert terrain around the crash site for the guy shot down in Iran, it offered ideal conditions for the Ghost Murmur. Low electromagnetic interference, minimal human activity, and the contrast between a living body and the cool desert floor at night. And this provided multiple layers of confirmation so they could find and save this person. But they can't find a retired Air Force general who wandered off in New Mexico, technically the same desert terrain that offers ideal conditions for Ghost Murmur, And once again, if you think that it's not a matter of national security to make sure General McCasland is found and hasn't fallen into the wrong hands, you would be wrong. He knows a lot. He would be very important to some people, or maybe some non-human people. I don't know. So after his meeting at Skunk Works and with Skunk Works, DeLonge claims to have met with top officials at NASA, the Air Force, the U.S. intelligence apparatus, and high-ranking U.S. political figures who helped him put together a team of highly qualified and deeply connected government insiders that would basically help him with To the Stars Academy and direct the efforts of To the Stars Academy, and then supply Tom with information, right? Like inside information. So in July of 2016, this would be about, 6 months after that January 2016 email where John Podesta is putting together all of these people, DeLonge talked about having a meeting with someone he referred to as the general, right? And the general, he talks about the general a lot. It is by now been confirmed when he's talking about the general, he's referring to General William McCasland, who just walked away from his house and disappeared a few months ago. So Tom's going and flying somewhere to meet the general. And he says, quote, "I landed on the tarmac, walked off the plane, and met a smart and fit man in his 60s. Never seen a multi-star general before, let alone talked to one. He led me to a table in the back of a large room. He leaned across the table and said, 'It was the Cold War. And we lived under the very real threat of nuclear war every day. And somewhere in those years, we found a life form.' I said, 'Sir, I need help telling young adults this story.' He said, 'What do you need?' 'Advisors,' I responded. 'I need high-ranking advisors in the military, intelligence, and DOD to help guide me.' So I was given 10 advisors, each with knowledge in different areas that pertain to UFOs and the very real national security issues associated with them." End quote. Now, like I said, this definitely was General McCasland. Tom is saying that General McCasland helped introduce him to people who eventually he would get this information from and help guide the To the Stars mission. Tom describes this general as a person who has multiple PhDs. Tom says in the interview, "I wish I could tell you who he is and what. And then he says there was nobody above him. There's nobody, maybe a couple. But when you look at the divisions of how the Department of Defense works, in this specific division, it's just extraordinary that I have this contact. So I started using that as much as I could. He says that after the general told him they found a life form, he said, quote, everything that we did and every decision that we made with that life form was because of the consciousness at that time, end quote, which is the Cold War. Now, the reason we know that Tom DeLonge was definitely talking to and about General McCasland every time he refers to the person he calls the general, we know this because in the Podesta emails, Tom DeLonge told John Podesta that he believed the government had recovered alien technology and that there were classified aerospace programs studying it. And he also said outright that he was working with General McCasland, who was, quote, in charge of all that stuff, end quote. In his interview with George Knapp in 2016, Tom DeLonge stated, quote, when you're meeting with these people within government and you understand what the subject's about, you kind of really have a respect for the enormity on their shoulders and what they're dealing with. And so I was really humble about what my asks were. I was really respectful about security programs and their security clearances and their classified programs. So I really know how to navigate, like not getting them in trouble, but creating a framework of how we can push the ball down the field. And I always delivered on what I said I would do. And I was always willing to learn a better way of doing it. The first few I sat with, my heart was pounding and I was shaking, but I had to pretend I wasn't, because it's one thing to think something's real, and it's another to sit with somebody that has stars on their shoulders saying, this is absolutely real and you don't know the stakes, end quote. Now, of course, General McCasland, I believe he was a 2-star general. When he's talking about stars on his shoulders, he's saying, I'm sitting down with a general who has 2 stars on his shoulders or stars on his shoulders. Now, this might all sound crazy, but it is now pretty much considered a fact that General William Neal McCasland worked with Tom DeLonge, whose main focus was not only disclosing that there is life out there in the universe outside of us, but also researching and developing advanced technology. In fact, Tom and the To the Stars Academy claim they have some sort of like extraterrestrial spacecraft that they're working on and trying to replicate, but that's a story for another day. And McCasland was someone who, as we have discussed, had top secret access to multiple government and military programs centered around space, satellites, advanced weaponry, advanced technology. General McCasland vanished into thin air 6 days after Donald Trump announced that he would be trying to release files pertaining to UFOs and aliens. Just last week, it might be 2 weeks ago when you're seeing this, but just last week when I'm filming this, Congressman Tim Burchett was asked about General McCasland's disappearance, as well as the disappearances and deaths of other high-profile individuals. And here's what he had to say.
Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett is joining us. He's also a member of the Oversight and Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, good to see you. What do you think's going on here?
Well, I don't know exactly. I just know there are no coincidences in this town. These folks have disappeared or died mysteriously, and there's only thing that ties them together is the fact that they worked on things that are dealing with outer space, whether it's UFOs or nuclear secrets or missiles or what have you. But I think we need full disclosure. When I'm in a meeting, in a closed door meeting, and I asked about the president's points on these, and then I'm told by some arrogant, unelected bureaucrat that the president is on a need-to-know basis. I think that says everything it needs to be said about what's going on. I think there's an arrogance, there's an underlying, I talked to the president about this. I said, it's just layers of the onion, Mr. President. You peel one off, and there's another one underneath. You put your top people in, and it's just too much to clear out in 4 years. And it's just, we've got a real problem, I think, in this area. And I think you've got some arrogance. When I sit in a meeting and some little punk with a man bun is sort of running the show, and you have decorated military officers in the meeting there that are basically unallowed to say anything, and you can read their faces what's going on.
Well, General McCasland, he was not a minor player at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He was there for more than 35 years. At one point, he was the top guy at that base, and he just disappears. His family has no idea what happened. Do you think the cases are connected, or do you think this is just some absolutely wild coincidence? Because all 4 of these people are also connected in some way.
Yeah, I think some of them could be a domestic issue, but I think overall, I think there is a connection there.
Okay, so you do think this is a conspiracy?
it'll come out, and it gives enough time for the trail to go. You know, it's like when a kid in Washington D.C. gets they find him dead, and they claim that he was mugged, yet his watch and wallet and he's got cash on him are not taken. But that's just the story that's put out, and that's what we believe. So
yeah,
I just do not believe this is by coincidence.
and people just do not disappear. And the connections between all four of these people, people just don't.
Not in this day and age. No, yeah. So you've got to have some real inside type of operation.
So we will come back to General McCasland. We have to, because he's connected to our next story. But now let's switch gears and talk about Monica Reza, who disappeared 8 months before General McCasland disappeared. 60-year-old Monica Reza was last seen on June 22nd, 2025, while she was hiking with 2 experienced companions on the popular Mount Waterman Trail in the Angeles National Forest.
To developing news tonight, the search is on for a 60-year-old woman missing in the Angeles National Forest. Monica Reza was last seen near Mount Waterman yesterday at about 9 a.m.
The LA County Sheriff Department's Crescenta Valley Station and Montrose Search and Rescue have been working around the clock on this one. They say Air Rescue 5 and search and rescue teams from LA, San Diego, Ventura, Riverside, and soon Orange and San Bernardino counties are all out searching.
The circumstances of Monica's disappearance are quite odd, I must say. Okay? Very, very odd. In fact, you know, way more odd than General McCasland's disappearance, even though it's not odd that he disappeared based on what he knew. But I'm saying it doesn't add up. I don't know how she just vanished like this. I also want to say that there are amazing and smart people all over the internet. And there's this forum called, I think it's Spartan, and it appears to be, you know, a pretty niche hiking and outdoor forum focused on the San Gabriel Mountains and surrounding areas. So these people talk about all sorts of stuff related to hiking, the trails, the terrain, the area, tips, tricks, etc. And recently they've been talking about Monica's disappearance. So a user called RH posted a timeline based on statements and metadata from pictures that Monica and the other hikers took that day. So RH refers to Monica and the other 2 hikers as A, the lead hiker, B, Monica, and C, the third hiker. So according to this timeline, Monica, along with hiker A and C, departed the 6,000-foot day-use trailhead on Angeles Crest Highway at approximately 6:30 a.m. that day. Apparently, they all carpooled to this area. Monica's car was left behind at someone else's house back in the city. The 3 started the hike, but at the bottom of a steep section, about 1.2 miles from where they started, one of the hikers, hiker C, stopped because the hike was getting too tough. So this was around 7:15 a.m. Hiker C decided to remain where they were, leaving just Monica and hiker A to continue on to the summit of Mount Waterman, which they reached at around 8:15 a.m. after hiking for about another 1.6 miles. So this is a photograph of Monica Reza before she went missing. It's believed the photo was taken at the summit. At 8:40 a.m., Monica and hiker A start going back down the trail. Apparently they were like running or jogging. And after about a mile, they encountered another couple of people that were going uphill near Double Delight Peak. They exchanged greetings. Everyone moved on. This happened at 9 a.m. And at 9:01 a.m., a picture was taken of Monica. And the metadata shows the picture was taken near Double Delight Peak. So a minute later, another picture of Monica was taken. And that metadata shows that it was about 70 feet from the location of the previous photo. Monica's last known location at 9:07 a.m. was about 422 meters, or roughly 0.26 miles from the location of the photo taken at 9:02 a.m. An extremely short distance, by the way, approximately a 4 to 5 minute walk. So hiker A reported that they were approaching a northbound right turn on the ridge. He yelled back to Monica to let her know that there was a turn coming up. She acknowledged him by nodding and waving. And at first, hiker A said that when he turned to yell to Monica, she was 30 yards behind him. He since changed that distance and clarified that she was only 30 feet behind him. And that's pretty close. Like, I don't know if you would necessarily have to yell out to a person who was only 30 feet behind you, but that's what he said. So hiker A, he makes the right turn. He said he descended about 150 feet And then he realized Monica was no longer behind him. So at 9:12 a.m., Hiker A waited on the trail for Monica for about 5 minutes before returning to where he had last seen her, but Monica was nowhere to be found. At this point, he started calling her name, and allegedly Hiker C, who was at that time about 1,600 feet away from Hiker A and 500 feet below the ridge line, he could hear Hiker A calling out Monica's name. Now, Monica, who could not have gotten far in the space of roughly 10 minutes, let's be honest, she would also have been able to hear if someone was calling out her name, right? If she was able to respond. So what the hell happened to Monica, and where the hell was she, and where the hell is she now? So Hiker A said he called out Monica's name. She doesn't answer. He looked around for Monica. He said he searched 200 yards west on the ridge and 120 feet south of her last known location. By 9:40 a.m., Hiker A had returned to Hiker C at the bottom of the steep section of trail. And then Hiker A and Hiker C either started walking back to the car or looking around for Monica. That's unclear. But then they ran into another group of hikers, and one of them happened to be a former search and rescue member. So these hikers, along with Hiker A, they go back up to where Monica was last seen. Hiker C stayed at the bottom of the steep section of trail. So actually, I would say that probably Hiker A and Hiker C did not look around for Monica, because Hiker A went back down to Hiker C. And the reason Hiker C wasn't even with them to begin with was because the trail was too hard for that person. So yeah, I would say they probably just started walking back to the car. I'm not sure. But then they ended up back at the bottom part of the trail, like the section of the trail where Hiker C was waiting the whole time. But either way, at 10 a.m., Hiker A and the other hikers are searching for Monica around the ridge. They do this for 30 minutes. And at that point, I don't know what the hell Hiker C is doing, but the former search and rescue member told Hiker A, return to the car, trigger an SOS signal. Hiker A does that at 10:53 a.m. At 11:15 a.m., Hiker C and Hiker A, they flag down a sheriff's deputy who happens to be driving by, and by noon, the first official search and rescue members arrived on the scene. By 12:30, search and rescue was on the trails searching for Monica. Around 1:30, air searches began with a helicopter, and then there was 2 hikers who were returning from Twin Peaks, and they would later report that at around 2:30 p.m., they heard what sounded like a female yelling out in anguish or despair, not calling out for help necessarily. They just said like yelling out in anguish and despair. And this was reportedly around the Twin Peaks saddle area. The coordinates of that area is only about 1,600 feet from Monica's last known location, just under a third of a mile, roughly 5 to 6 minute walk. So was that Monica? Some people say it was like maybe a coyote. I guess they scream. I'm not a wilderness person, so I couldn't tell you, but apparently sometimes coyotes scream and it sounds like a woman screaming. But don't you think people out there hiking would know the difference? But if that was Monica, why was she able to shout out then, but not when Hiker A was calling her name? And what was she shouting out about? And where the heck was she? Because like I said, the place where they said they heard the scream was not far from where her last known location was, just like a 5 to 6 minute walk. So Monica Reza was an experienced hiker. She hiked that specific area all the time, weekly, some reports have stated, and she simply vanished and no one has seen her since. She was last seen 30 feet behind her friend, and she was out of his sight for 10 minutes tops. What the hell happened here? So acting Captain Ryan A. Vienna of the LA County Sheriff's Office reported that they had pulled out all the stops to help find Monica. And they really did. They brought in Montrose Search and Rescue. Search and Rescue was joined by units from Altadena, Antelope Valley, we're going to talk about that, but Malibu, San Dimas, Sierra Madre, San Diego, Ventura County, Orange County, San Bernardino County, Riverside. Vienna also thanked their federal partners for the assistance that they provided, although he didn't name those federal partners. So apparently, probably the FBI, right? But he's thanking federal partners because Monica is somebody who's important, just like General McCasland was. They had helicopters up there running thermal imaging sweeps, looking in the woods in the wilderness for body signatures. They used forward-looking infrared cameras the following morning. They did find a bear, but no sign of Monica Reza. They even ran an algorithmic pixel matching program through the aerial photography equipment. And this was calibrated specifically to pick up the red in Monica's shirt. Now, this technology did flag some targets, but each time searchers went to that area, they found Mylar balloons. And at first I was like, all the searchers found Mylar balloons? This is suspicious. Who's leaving behind Mylar balloons for these people? You know, because that's where my brain goes. But I always look into things. And I guess this is actually a pretty common thing, because in this forum, these people were saying they're always finding Mylar balloons. And when I looked it up, it was like, yeah, this happens all the time. Mylar balloons are like foil. They're filled with helium. They can drift miles, even dozens of miles from where they were released. And they often end up in remote areas where search and rescue searches take place because they get caught up in like trees and stuff. So that was common. Nobody was leaving balloons behind for the searchers. So on the morning of June 23rd, so the following morning, a beanie belonging to Monica was found in a steep ravine south of the ridge she was last seen on, descending downwards towards Devil's Canyon. That name is very interesting. So the location is very close to where Monica was last seen, roughly 210 meters, about the length of 2 football fields, a walking distance of 2 to 3 minutes from where she was last seen. Now, reportedly, scent dogs tracked Monica's scent from the upper ridge into the ravine, but then lost her scent completely. But according to a poster, Mario V, on Espartian, they had talked. Mario said he had talked to Hiker A, and Hiker A claimed the beanie was located by a search and rescue member, and then a scent dog was brought into the ravine to establish Monica's scent, but the dog was not able to pick up her scent at that location. Was the dog able to pick up her scent from the beanie? Was it Monica's beanie? I know we see her with it in pictures, but was it Monica's beanie? Because the dog goes and gets the scent off the beanie, or goes to the area in the ravine where the beanie was, can't pick up the scent. So there's no like exit or entry point. So if Monica went into the ravine and didn't go out, where the hell is she? Now, this same poster, Mario, also said, quote, "I did descend down that ravine and it was a sketchy terrain with a loose and steep slope. I don't see how Monica thought that was the right way to the parking lot and kept blindly descending instead of stopping and returning to the ridge to reorient herself. I also wonder why she would not call out for her partner and why she would not hear her partner's calls. Supposedly, he was back at the ridge in less than 10 minutes since last seeing her, and I can't imagine she descended too far down that ravine in those 10 minutes. Strange," end quote. My opinion, Monica was never in that ravine, okay? Because exactly, she would have heard people calling out for her. If she was not incapacitated in some way within moments of Hiker A last seeing her, she would have still been close enough to hear people calling out for her or to call for help. What's going on here? Strange indeed, Mario V. Very strange. So volunteers and authorities searched this area for months using every available resource. They have never found a single sign of Monica Reyes except for that random beanie that somehow ended up in the ravine without her scent. Don't know, but understand, once again, Monica was an experienced hiker. She lived in that area. She had hiked those trails before. Why would she hear her friend 30 feet ahead of her be like, "Hey, there's a turn right here"? And Monica's like, "Okay, great." And then she's like, "I think I'll go in a ravine." No, it doesn't make any sense. So who is Monica Reyes and why are we talking about her? Well, as it turns out, she has ties to General McCasland. She has ties to the U.S. government, to the U.S. military, and she created something that is very valuable to the U.S. government and military. Monica was a materials scientist and aerospace engineer who worked at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the JPL. So the JPL is a federally funded research lab. It's run by NASA, but managed by the California Institute of Technology, Caltech. So the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base are tightly linked, and they often collaborate on critical aerospace research. Now, Monica Reyes was a brilliant human, right? She did a lot of things in her life and throughout her career. She graduated from Columbia University with a bachelor's degree in metallurgical engineering, which is like metals and stuff. And she started working at a company called Aerojet Rocketdyne in 1988. Aerojet Rocketdyne would end up being the ones who were kind of on the case to solve this huge problem for the United States. And they could not have done it without something called Mandeloy. So Mandeloy is a nickel-based super alloy that can withstand super intense high temperatures and pressure. And it does this without being set on fire itself or cracking. And this is important because the US didn't really have that technology before. And it was Monica and her colleague, Dallas Hardwick, who invented the super alloy in the mid-1990s. In 1999, both NASA and the Air Force Research Lab, which remember was run by General McCasland, they began funding Mandeloy because, of course, this super alloy would have applications for everything important, both space travel and military. Now, Dallas Hardwick, who was technically Monica's mentor, she would go on to work at the Air Force Research Lab at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base until she retired in 2012. General McCasland took command of the Air Force Research Lab in May of 2011, at which point Dallas Hardwick was one of his senior scientists. But also remember, McCasland was the material wing director at the Air Lab and commander of Phillips Research Site at Kirtland Air Force Base from 2001 to 2004, which would directly pertain to Monica's research, all of it. All of it would. Okay, so according to a press release from the Air Force in 2016, quote, the U.S. Air Force Research Lab and contractor Aerojet Rocketdyne achieved a major milestone under the Hydrocarbon Boost Program, which is advanced domestic rocket engine technologies in support of next-generation launch systems, end quote. This same press release attributed the major milestone to the first use of Mandeloy 2000 super alloy, which was co-developed by Rocketdyne and the AFRL Materials Directorate, which was co-developed by Aerojet Rocketdyne and the Air Force Research Laboratory Materials Directorate, which is what General McCasland was in charge of. And that's also where Dallas Hardwick went to work after. This was the laboratory that funded this superalloy, Mandeloy's evolution into something that would, as I said, solve a huge problem for the United States government. That's why so much money was being put into it, billions of dollars, specifically into the creation of an engine for a rocket ship, the AR-1. That was kind of the birth of why they were trying to find this metal. So to understand why Aerojet Rocketdyne's AR-1 engine is so important, we have to talk about the RD-180. This is a Russian-built rocket engine developed in the 1990s. And this is the engine that the United States used for a very long time in their rocket ships and to power their satellites and stuff, right? And you might say, why is the United States using Russian rocket engines to power like the satellites that are carrying their national intelligence and, you know, all the sensitive information? Well, it's an interesting story because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that country's entire state-funded scientific system basically imploded overnight, right? So that meant thousands of very smart people with a lot of information were out of a job. You know, thousands of rocket engineers, nuclear physicists, weapons designers who were sitting on some of the most advanced military knowledge and technology in the world, they were no longer getting a paycheck. So to the United States, this was a nightmare scenario because they knew there was a very real chance that because these people didn't have a job and weren't getting paid, they could be recruited by Iran, North Korea, China, not just for rocket engines, but for ballistic missile programs and nuclear delivery systems. So the United States actually helped fund and support programs to keep former Soviet scientists in Russia and employed. Basically, like, we'll keep you in your home. We will put money in your pocket. Please don't go over to China or Iran or North Korea. Please don't do it. One of these projects that the United States funded was the RD-180, a rocket engine that could operate at extreme pressure and use oxygen-rich pre-burners successfully, a rocket engine that the United States had not and could not figure out how to build. So why? It feels like it should be, you know, we have engines that, you know, send rockets into space and stuff. We have since the 60s and 70s, right? We did like missions with NASA. Yes, but not one like this. Not an engine that could go so far and so fast, so efficiently. So think of a rocket engine like a controlled explosion in a metal tube. The more pressure inside, the more powerful the thrust, which means the rocket can obviously not only lift more weight, but it uses fuel more efficiently. Fuel is important. So the Soviets basically said, hey, let's crank up the pressure in our rocket engines as high as possible so that they're the best ever. But usually there'd be an issue with high pressure, you know, because that means more heat, more force, more stress on the engine. And this causes most engines to crack, melt, explode, malfunction. Now you add in the oxygen-rich pre-burners, which once again makes the rockets way more efficient, use less fuel, but the United States wasn't using those because it's also very dangerous. Because when you're running super hot, high-pressure oxygen through metal components, that oxygen will literally eat the metal and cause it to burn from the inside, which isn't what you want in an engine that's powering a rocket going into space. So the United States couldn't make this type of rocket engine, a better, more efficient engine, because they had not figured out how to make a metal that didn't melt at these high temperatures. Russia figured out how to use materials that didn't burn easily in oxygen. They figured out how to keep everything cool enough to not melt and design the engine so that it didn't destroy itself. Well, we didn't know how to do that. So because the US didn't know how to do that, and because they wanted to make sure that, you know, all of that Russian brain power didn't fall into the wrong hands, they decided, let's team up with Russia, right? Everybody's going to be happy. Lockheed Martin licensed the RD-180. The engines were built in Russia and then imported to the US. And the engine was first used in 2002 for the Atlas rocket. So for the following 2 decades, the RD-180 powered launches of spy satellites, military communications, satellites, GPS satellites, NASA science missions, basically everything that was critical to the United States, national security, and like space exploration, you know, like science and being able to keep up with other countries, which meant we depended on these Russian rocket engines for national safety and defense and to like also keep up with the world stage, which, you know, is a big deal, right? For all these countries. That's why the whole space race happened. And that's why the whole nuclear weapons things happened. Like, we all have to make sure that nobody has better stuff than us, and nobody's smarter than us, and nobody's doing things that we also can't do or didn't do first. It's a huge pissing contest always, but it's very, very, very important to the heads and the people in charge of all these countries. It's very important. I think it's stupid. I understand why they feel this way. I understand why they're going to sort of make us feel like they have to do it, but I think it's stupid. So working with Russia and having them build the engines for our rockets and everything, this strategy worked at first. So for a while, after the Cold War, US and Russia relations were okay. They were like relatively cooperative and stable, and everyone was getting what they wanted. But the entire thing depended on the assumption that Russia would stay a stable and cooperative partner, which we know they didn't, because then in 2014, Russia took territory from Ukraine using military force. And then the US and the UN were like, oh man, why'd you have to, you can't do that. You can't do that. Why'd you have to do that? So it changed the borders in Europe. It challenged the post-Cold War order. We put sanctions on Russia. Russia got mad, and their deputy prime minister announced that Russia would ban the US from using Russian-made rocket engines for military launches. So enter Aerojet Rocketdyne, who in 2014 lobbied the US government to fund an all-new US-sourced rocket propulsion system that would replace the Russian RD-180. Rocketdyne said they believed they could build this engine and they could do it in a way that would be more affordable. They created an engine called the AR-1, and they were like, listen, we're going to make this engine and we're just going to swap the RD-180 out of the Atlas rocket, and that way we don't have to build a whole new rocket, right? Because these rockets are designed around the engines that are built for them. And the whole problem with Russia being like, you can't use our engines anymore, and we're going to stop selling them to you, and we're going to stop giving them to you, was that we had all these rockets designed around these engines. So if something happened to the engines, we wouldn't be able to replace them, and then that rocket would be basically useless. So Aerojet Rocketdyne was like, we can fix this problem. We don't have to build a whole new rocket. It'll be cheap. We'll just make an engine that like kind of fits in the same way, and we'll make it better. And so we can do this for you. And basically at that time, Aerojet Rocketdyne was already deeply intertwined with the US government. They'd already built engines for NASA and the military and had multiple government contracts. Now, inevitably, as the story goes, which is why I laughed when they said they could do it for cheap, it wasn't actually that cheap. It would require significant government funding. It was going to take years to develop. And at that time, we didn't have years because we were about to be engineless in our rocket ships. So the government ended up going in a different direction. Competitors convinced them to go bigger. They were like, hey, screw swapping out these engines. That's small time thinking. You should spend billions to build new rockets, which is what we ended up doing. The United States ended up building some new rockets, but don't get me wrong, they were still trying to figure out a way that they could use the old rockets with new engines. So they got multiple things going on. They got multiple irons in the fire right now. Now we know that the Air Force and NASA were pouring money into the research and development of this super alloy, Mandeloy, right? What Monica Reyes created. Actually, the MON in Mandeloy stands for Monica. So in 2017, Space News put out an article where they interviewed Monica Reyes about Mandeloy. And the article states that Aerojet Rocketdyne relies on Mandeloy for key components of their AR-1 engine, as well as other engines, by the way. And it says that Aerojet Rocketdyne plans to deliver this engine to the Air Force for qualification in 2019. Now, in this article, Monica states, quote, because Mandeloy is a family of alloys, I worked with the Air Force to scale up production, look at different processing methods, and get the material ready for insertion into a rocket engine, end quote. She also said that the AR-1 engine, which remember, is the United States and Aerojet Rocketdyne's kind of replacement for the RD-180, the Russian engine. She said the AR-1 has 12 different components made out of Mandeloy. It was used in most of the components that would be exposed to hot gaseous oxygen, such as the preburner, turbine rotor, turbine housing, duct lines, hot gas manifold, a lot of components. Basically, this engine probably wouldn't work as well and be as efficient and be as good without Mandeloy. So Monica said that Mandeloy helped meet affordability goals. The alloy was developed in-house and had the needed characteristics of being compatible with the high pressure, high temperature oxygen, and it has high strength. It also allows them to avoid the use of coatings, which makes the rocket less heavy, which obviously makes it more fuel efficient. You know, they want to be not heavy. They don't want these rockets to be very heavy. That's what I found out from researching rockets and rocket engines. The main thing is they're like, how can we keep this as light as possible? So if the United States had decided to go a different direction, away from the AR-1, and they were like, okay, rocket, jet, Aerodyne, whatever, you keep trying to make that, but we're still going to build new rockets. If that was the case, then why were the Air Force and NASA still so interested in funding Mandeloy? Well, obviously, because they still want the engines to be made, but also because the super alloy wasn't just for AR-1. It wasn't just for the rocket engine. It's a foundational technology that can be used in all sorts of places, all sorts of things, hypersonic weapons, missile systems. The whole situation with Russia and the RD-180 had exposed an undeniable weakness for this country. We had, for some reason, not invested in the right science or technology, and we'd lost the ability to build certain high-performance engines. We had fallen behind, and you know, we don't like to fall behind. The government and military wanted to make sure we never fell behind again. So we still had some of the reliable RD-180 engines, by the way, because like I said, we had all these rockets designed around those specific engines. And even though we didn't buy any more from Russia, the show had to go on. And by the way, we had developed a sort of tense agreement with Russia where they were still like helping us service those engines. But then Russia invaded Ukraine again. And in March of 22, the US and their allies hit Russia with heavy sanctions again. And Russia's space agency said that that was over too. They would no longer service the engines. No more help troubleshooting issues. No more tech support in the middle of the night. No more engineering support. No more spare or replacement parts. Completely cut off. And that was a big problem because those engines were being used for military satellites and intelligence missions. But remember, Mandeloy wouldn't just be an answer for rocket engines. The way it was made to withstand so much pressure and heat created endless possibilities for the people of NASA and the Air Force Research Lab, which was headed by General McCasland, who, remember, had a whole ass materials and manufacturing directorate whose objective it was to develop and improve the materials and manufacturing methods needed to build the Air Force's most advanced systems, materials that are better, stronger, lighter, heat resistant, materials that allow the United States to maintain technological superiority and enable next generation weapons and systems, which is terrifying. As that 2016 Air Force press release stated, quote, the DoD is absolutely committed to transitioning off the RD-180 as quickly as possible while ensuring no impacts to national security. Programs such as BPTM, that's an Aerojet Rocketdyne program, are essential to achieving that objective while solidifying U.S. assured access to space and supporting the U.S.'s launch industry's viability in the global market. End quote. So that was said by Lieutenant General Samuel Reyes, the SMC commander and Air Force Program Executive Officer for Space. So it sounds like Mandeloy is pretty important to me, right? It's very important to the government, the military, national security. And now the two people who held the patents on it are either dead or missing, which is weird. But, you know, I'll talk about that in a second. Because remember, it was Monica and her mentor, Dallas Hardwick. By 2005, Dallas Hardwick was leading all materials research for advanced group turbine engines at the Air Force Research Laboratory Materials Directorate at Wright-Patterson. This was the exact place and the exact program that General McCasland was in charge of. Now, I also want to talk about the Sentinel Network. Check them out because they've done amazing work on these cases. They do online reporting. They've untwisted the web. They've been trying to decode things. And as they said, quote, Monica Reyes built the alloy at Aerojet Rocketdyne. Hardwick's team qualified it at Wright-Patterson. When McCasland took command of the Air Force Research Lab in May of 2011, Hardwick was still there. Reyes' contracts were still active. All three of them were on the same program at the same time, end quote. The Sentinel goes on to report that until 2023, every public record listed Monica Reyes as Monica Jacinto. So I believe that was her married name. And she was listed as a technical fellow at Aerojet Rocketdyne. In July of 2023, a company called L3 Harris acquired Aerojet for $4.7 billion. Whew, that's a lot of money. And then all of a sudden, after that, Monica is being referred to as Monica Reyes of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and NASA. She was actually listed as that on the 2024-2025 Dean's Advisory Board at Caltech. So the Sentinel says, quote, she moved from the defense contractor that builds the engines to the NASA lab that sits in the Crescenta Valley 30 miles down Angeles Crest Highway from the ridgeline where she vanished under her family name rather than the professional name attached to her patents and publications, end quote. So JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, as we know, is a federally funded research and development center managed by Caltech for NASA. It builds planetary spacecraft, operates something called the Deep Space Network. The Deep Space Network is a global system of giant radio antennas used by NASA to communicate with spacecraft far beyond Earth. So an article in Science Daily from 2025 said that from this network of antennas and communication centers that's going out into deep space, we might accidentally be broadcasting our location and our existence to alien civilizations. Quote, a new study shows that our deep space transmissions, especially those aimed at Mars and interplanetary spacecraft, spill over into space in detectable patterns. If extraterrestrial observers were aligned with a certain planetary position, they'd have a strong chance of catching our signals, end quote. I believe the actual study, because I read it, said something like there was a 77% chance that if there was like aliens out there, we would be sending like huge messages like, here we are, we're over here. That is quite strong, 77%. Now, the article goes on to say that the findings suggest that by mirroring this logic, looking for exoplanet alignments and focusing on nearby star systems, we could boost our own search for alien technosignatures. And I know someone who was doing that, focusing on nearby star systems and looking for exoplanets. His name was Carl Grillmeyer, and he was shot dead on his front porch on February 16th, 2026 in California. Carl Grillmeyer also worked for Caltech and NASA. And if you choose to continue this journey with me, we will get there. So the Sentinel Network, they go on to point out that after Monica disappeared, there was no public statement from Aerojet Rocketdyne, which she worked for forever. She created like this super alloy that allowed them to, you know, be the favorite child of the United States government and military. There was no public statement from NASA or the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is where she was working at the time of her disappearance. The Sentinel Network's article says, quote, the only signal from inside the system is a Reddit comment on the social hiking platform that says, quote, any updates on the search? I'm a JPLer and something is not right about the story. She needs to be found, end quote. Now, Monica's Mandeloy co-inventor, Dallas Hardwick, also quietly passed away in Dayton, Ohio on January 4th, 2014, after a stage 4 breast cancer diagnosis. Once again, no announcements or memorials were made. Dallas Hardwick was at that time still working remotely for the Air Force Research Lab at Wright-Patterson. she had helped create something that benefited her country and national security and the military so much. Space travel, right? She had been awarded the Meritorious Civilian Service Medal, but nothing, not even a mention of her death in her local paper, the Dayton Daily News. 4 days after Monica disappeared and 3 days before the official search was ended or suspended, someone created a memorial for Monica Reza on Find a Grave. So I will put it up here because now if you try to find it on the internet, it says that the link is no longer there. And it was created by somebody who identified themselves as Lillian, and their profile is no longer publicly accessible. But, you know, we've got the Wayback Machine and we're able to find things. Once again, I'm sure the powers that be hate the Wayback Machine. This memorial stated that Monica Reza, born December 30th, 1964, died June 22nd, 2025, the day she went missing. It says death location, Angeles National Forest, Los Angeles County, California, USA. And the remains, it says green burial. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with what a green burial is. I only really am because I've heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about it before, and he says like that's the best way to be buried. But it basically means you're not embalmed, you're not prepared for burial, you're not put in like a coffin. You're just your body is put in the earth, and then you know the things happen to a body that happen after death, and you're biodegradable. You go back into the earth, ash to ashes, dust to dust, all of that. A green burial, very, very weird. So I don't know what happened. I don't know why somebody would do that, but it is very strange that really no one who knew Monica or worked with her throughout her very long and illustrious career in science and technology and all her achievements, no one made an officially like nice memorial. And usually you'll see that with some of the other people that we talk about during this segment or this series when we talk about these missing and dead scientists. That was done for some of these people, that their colleagues who worked at the colleges or at the government entities with them would say, oh, so and so was such a good person, so smart, they were working on this project. Nothing for Monica. Now, one last comment on military weapons and how important they are to everything in the eyes of the government and all others, right? So these are weapons that are being created and probably are already created that we won't even hear about until they've been used for years, like lasers, for instance, which is something that General McCasland and the Air Force Research Lab were deeply invested in. The US government has spent decades developing lasers from early experiments to modern weapons. And the whole thing is they're driven by the goal of delivering precise, high-speed energy to targets, with recent technology finally making that practical. Okay, that's what the government's website says. So Helios is the newest thing that we just heard about. It has been described as a 60 plus kilowatt class laser weapon system built by Lockheed Martin, extremely powerful, extremely cheap, right? Because launching a missile costs hundreds of millions of dollars. A laser shot costs under $1. So in mid-March of 2026, we heard the US was deploying technology in the Iran war that would bring the cost of shooting a drone down from several million to just a few cents. And it was reported that the USS Preble, a Navy ship, had downed several Iranian drones with Helios, this laser system. We were then told the weapon system was going to be integrated into naval ships and amphibious craft as a defense against drone and missile attacks. And then Lockheed Martin said, also, by the way, the laser is scalable. Like the current architecture, the way it's built now, is capable of reaching 120 kilowatts. But it's not like we're using lasers to kill people, right? That would be crazy. That would be too like Star Wars-y. But get this, Lockheed Martin is developing laser weapons 5 times stronger than the current system, which is Helios. But we won't use those to kill anyone, right? Right now, we're just taking down drones, but they are making lasers mobile, like as in you can put them on your weapon and carry them around with you. And they say, once again, it's for shooting down drones. Because if you're in the military and you're like, oh, drone, they can't know where I am, you can just shoot it down with your laser. But it's crazy because every government's military is currently spending a lot of money developing their own laser weaponry. They will become more powerful with longer ranges. They will be used however each government sees fit. We live in crazy times. Okay, so General William McCasland and Monica Reza, who are connected since he directly decided to fund Mandeloy, they both go missing in similar ways. They're both like avid outdoors people. They hike all the time. All of a sudden, they can't hike that day because they just accidentally go missing. Now, some people wonder if Mandeloy, the super alloy, was able to be created due to certain extraterrestrial materials that General McCasland may have been aware of during his work at Wright-Patterson. You know, certain materials that could have been reverse engineered. I mean, we did use Russia's rocket engines for a long time because we couldn't figure out how to make our own. But suddenly Monica Reza and Dallas Hardwick figured it out, and McCasland and the Air Force, along with NASA, funded it. I don't know. Like, I'm more leaning towards it wasn't alien material that we re-engineered or reverse engineered, because Russia kind of had already figured out how to do it. We may have reverse engineered Russia's stuff. That could be a possible thing. But does that mean I don't think we have alien spacecraft? No, it doesn't. I think we do. Actually, I think in this entire maze of deaths and disappearances of definite national security issues, everyone really isn't trying to figure out if these weird occurrences are connected or if they mean something. They're really trying to figure out like who's behind it and why. Is it aliens? Is it foreign entities trying to get the information these people had, or trying to stop them from doing their work? Is it our own government trying to sneak these people away or get rid of them before someone else gets their hands on them? Is it because of what they know about these secret like SAP programs? What is it? We have so much more to talk about, but that will have to wait for another video. And if you're thinking I'm reaching or that it's not that serious, you should see the whiteboard in my office, okay? Because there are so many connections. But before we do go, we still have some more to talk about, because I need to talk about the thing that's been in the news a lot lately, the actual news. And based on what we have talked about today, it might have something to do with all of this. Aliens. Because let's be honest, folks, they've been priming us for this for at least the last 10 years. In 2017, the New York Times revealed the existence of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. We're going to call it AATIP or ATIP, which is easier because I'm not saying all those words again. So starting around 2007, the ATIP was created to investigate aerial objects that could not be easily explained and might pose a national security threat. This program was led by Luis Elizondo, and allegedly the program officially ended around 2012. But after leaving government, Elizondo partnered with Tom DeLonge to the Stars Academy, and he acknowledged that ATIP did continue on for some time in some form after 2012. In 2022, we had in this country our first public congressional hearings on UFOs or UAPs in over 50 years. Two key Pentagon officials testified: Ronald Moultrie, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, and Scott Bray, the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence. And these were two of the people responsible for tracking and analyzing UAP data. Now, the biggest revelation from these hearings was that there were way more sightings of UAPs than expected. They said the number of reported UAP incidents had jumped to over 400 cases, and they described the sightings as frequent and continuing. And people were like, what? Frequent and continuing? This shocked people. We learned also that there had been at least 11 near-miss incidents between UAPs and U.S. aircraft. But in these hearings, they wanted to be very clear that these UAPs were not confirmed to be of extraterrestrial origin. They had not recovered alien materials, and there had been no communication attempt with the objects, which is like, why wouldn't you attempt to communicate with the objects and see who they were? Why wouldn't you do that? Like, that's weird. I would definitely have done that. So this hearing led to more formal efforts, including a study team commissioned by NASA and the creation of permanent UAP investigation offices, eventually evolving into All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which was established in July of 2022 within the Department of Defense. So in July of 2023, a group of U.S. senators led by Chuck Schumer introduced a major legislation aimed at forcing the government to release records related to UAPs. And this proposal became known as the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act of 2023. Why can't they give these things simpler names? But this act was heavily modeled after the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992. That was a law that required the government to collect all assassination-related records, review them systematically, and release them to the public unless there was a strong national security reason not to. So the Disclosure Act which was not the JFK Act, it was the Alien Act. It proposed a centralized collection of all UAP records where every government agency would be required to basically search through what they had and turn over any UAP related material. And this included military agencies, intelligence agencies, military contract records. So people like Aerojet Rocketdyne and people like Skunk Works, they would have to turn everything over. So basically, instead of secrecy being the default, they were going to try to release everything they could to the public, and records could only stay classified if there was a clear, specific national security risk, right? And then they would have to say what the national security risk was, or like prove it in some way. They couldn't just be like, that's a national security risk and not show anything. And the records would have to be released within 25 years of creation, with older records being released much sooner after review. So in the bill, there was language about non-human intelligence and technologies of unknown origin. And this didn't necessarily confirm the existence of aliens, but it did show that lawmakers and people who are in government were taking the topic seriously enough to include this very broad, explicit language so that nobody could get around and say, well, you didn't ask for the non-human intelligence information. This was a pretty big deal because it wasn't fringe, it wasn't tinfoil hats, it was bipartisan, coming from top-level leadership and written into a major defense bill framework. We had hope, but then, of course, the original version of the bill was significantly watered down before it was passed, and some key provisions were removed or scaled back, especially around eminent domain over private UAP-related materials. So also in 2023, classified disclosures made by David Grush, who we talked about earlier, he had filed those with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. And this is the testimony we heard earlier, where David was stating that the U.S. governments and defense contractors have been running highly classified programs for decades. And the purpose of these programs is to recover and study crashed or landed craft of unknown origin, and they're keeping it secret from Congress. In late 2023, a wave of online discussion and some media commentary started circulating about a supposed soft disclosure process tied to UAPs, with a possible climax happening around 2027, which is hilarious because it appears that they hit the nail on the head, and we are right on schedule. Obviously, soft disclosure is not an official government term. It's a theory that instead of one shocking announcement to the public, like, hey, aliens exist, and we don't know what they want, or we do know and it's not good. Instead of that, governments around the world, not just ours, would gradually introduce information over time so that they would avoid public panic by like normalizing the topic and slowly increasing transparency. It's the whole frog in boiling water thing. And I feel like it has actually worked, right? Because there's so much going on in the world, and every time you turn on the news, it's like just catastrophe and tragedy and the worst possible things happening. And then you get a story and you're like, aliens are real, they're in the oceans. And we're like, all right. So in March of 2024, the Pentagon was like, listen, everyone, just shut up about this now. We've looked into it. We've extensively searched. We've found no proof of extraterrestrial technology. There's no hidden alien craft or secret crash retrieval programs. You guys are crazy. There's no evidence that anyone is hiding any programs from Congress. And Congress was like, no, we aren't satisfied with that. We're still not getting clear answers from you secretive shadesters. And so Congress held a new public hearing in November of 2024, this time focused on transparency, whistleblower protections, and to figure out whether information was still being withheld, which of course it was and still is. And once again, key witnesses like Luis Elizondo and Michael Gold, who was a former NASA associate administrator, testified. And these witnesses said there's secret, illegal UAP retrieval programs happening, and UAP technology is interacting with humans. Okay, then we go to AARO's 2024 reporting. Remember, this was the system set up to like track UAP settings. And once again, this showed a huge spike in reported UAP settings, more than 700 that year alone, with more than dozens unexplained and many of them labeled true anomalies that required further study. Enter 2025, shit just starts getting weirder. And now it feels like all of this alien stuff is being dropped into our everyday lives and like little tidbits that you wouldn't really notice or could go unnoticed if you weren't explicitly looking for it, which of course I have been. I love aliens. I've been looking for years for proof of what I know to be true. So Russ Coulthart, we talked about him already. He was on the News Nation interviews. he's not just on News Nation. He's an incredibly amazing investigative journalist. He's an acclaimed Australian investigative journalist. He works as a special correspondent for News Nation, where he hosts a segment called Reality Check. Ross is the real deal. He's not some oddball going live on YouTube for 17 hours wearing a tinfoil on his head, or that guy from Ancient Aliens. He has gained huge respect and recognition for his investigative exposés on organized crime, corruption, military affairs. He knows what he's talking about. He's won countless awards for his work. But since about 2017, Ross has focused his reporting on UAPs. So in 2025, we start hearing that there could be extraterrestrial life in the oceans now, which does not surprise me. Didn't then, doesn't now, because those oceans scare me more than space. I really think that there's something in there. Plus the dolphins. Should we talk about the dolphins? So here's Russ Coulthart discussing this on News Nation.
What is it about the coast of California? Why do you think we have so many reported encounters there?
Hello, Elizabeth. Look, I don't think it's a coincidence that California is the home to some of the biggest aerospace companies in America. And it's also probably the closest point where, if you were a non-human civilization, you could hide yourself very successfully in thousands of meters of water with a reasonable degree of certainty that you wouldn't be detected. There are, as we know, huge gulfs of water just off the coast of California. The Baja California area is where the US Nimitz incident happened in 2004. And we know also that there's been repeated sightings of anomalous phenomena, not just that boat captain, Thor, but many, many dozens, in fact, hundreds of sightings have taken place around Catalina Island, just off the coast of LA. And I guess I'm only speculating here, but if you were an alien civilization, 71% of the planet's surface is water. And if you're looking for a neutral environment that's temperature consistent, with low light where you want to hide, if there is an alien species targeting this planet, and a lot of people think there is, including certain congressmen, that would be the place to hide.
Yeah, and I've noted on the show before, 27% of the ocean is mapped out by humans. We've mapped out 27% of our oceans. We know more about the surface of Mars and the surface of the moon than we do about our own oceans.
That's so true. And Elizabeth, I'll tell you, I've spoken to submariners who are working out of the submarine fleet with nuclear submarines up near Seattle there. And they've told me that they've recorded anomalous phenomena moving faster than the speed of sound underwater. Like that's let's say faster than 1,000 knots underwater. We don't have any craft in the human technology that is capable
pressure, the water pressure that it's hard to swim in the ocean,
So we have this very silly situation where even under the current administration, there's a kind of a denial about the possibility of non-human intelligence, or NHI. But the people who are coming forward to me and to Ben Hansen in this story are basically people who've worked on the water around Catalina Island. We've spoken to people in the military, and there is a vast number of people who are willing to go on the record to say they have witnessed anomalous phenomena underwater doing extraordinary things.
Catalina Island. Isn't that where Natalie Wood fell off her boat? Anyways, yeah. Stuff moving underwater at the speed of light. No big deal. Let's just talk casually about that and then go on about our lives. So yeah, we get little breadcrumbs throughout 2025. And then 2026 hits. That brings us to present day. Randomly, Donald Trump says he's going to order to have the UFO data released. And at first I was like, what are you doing? What are you trying to distract me from? Okay. What are you saying? Look over here, everyone, while we do something over there kind of thing. That could be true, but I won't lie. I was intrigued. Then we have the Artemis moon mission, NASA's first attempt to send humans to the moon since the Apollo era of 1972. But this mission actually has a very different goal, and they're not really talking about that. Like, they're showing it on TV, and the astronauts are up there, and they're like waving, like, everything's great. We love this. Here's the dark side of the moon. But what did they go there for? They didn't just want to walk on the moon, right? NASA wants to establish a long-term sustainable human presence on the moon. NASA, along with commercial and international partners, is planning to establish habitats, solar power systems, and rovers for construction on the moon. And this is supposed to be like a stepping stone to eventually get to Mars. so that maybe we can like build stuff there and live there. It's a critical test bed for learning how to survive on other worlds. And they're specifically picking the area of the moon that they are because they said there's a lot of dark craters there and there could be water. They think there's water in there. So for this, NASA is using the Space Launch System, their most powerful rocket ever, powered by 4 RS-25 engines built by Aerojet Rocketdyne. I was wondering if Mandeloy was used in the engines of the Artemis mission. I looked it up, and the specs don't say. They don't say Mandeloy. They do, however, say the engines use nickel-based superalloys designed to survive extreme heat and pressure in oxygen-rich environments. I wish that Monica could see all her hard work going into space and going to the moon, but she's been missing. She's been missing. So let's talk about the timeline for these missing and murdered scientists really quick. These researchers and people with super secret security clearance and all of this knowledge. We haven't gone in depth with all of them yet. We've talked about Monica and we've talked about the general, but we will if you're willing to continue on this journey with me. I'm just going to focus on 6 of them for now. General McCasland, Monica Reyes, Melissa Cassius, Jason Thomas, Carl Grillmere, Nuno Lareo. These incidents all went down between 2025 and 2026, and I've grouped them together by date and location. Because they seem random at first, but like I said, you start putting them all out, not random. Monica Reyes goes missing on a hike in June of 2025. Melissa Cassius, who worked at Los Alamos Labs in New Mexico, mysteriously disappeared in June of 2025 after factory resetting both her personal and work cell phone. In December of 2025, Nuno Lareo, director of MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center, a nuclear scientist who had research contracts with the Department of Energy, he was shot at his front door in Massachusetts. The person they say did it, the same guy that they claim is the Brown University shooter, and that guy took his own life, so we can't ask him. Also, in December of 2025, Jason Thomas, a senior biomedical researcher at Novartis in Boston, disappeared. His remains were found a few months later, I believe in March, in a lake. No cause of death has been released. All right, so those both happened the same month. General McCasland, who's, as we have already discussed, is super important, has a lot of secret government and military information. He walks away from his home in New Mexico and he vanishes. That same month and same year, Carl Grillmere was shot and killed on the front porch of his home in Antelope Valley, California. Carl was an astronomer and astrophysicist, a research scientist at Caltech, and also heavily involved in some of NASA's most prominent missions, including the Hubble Space Telescope and NEOWISE, which is NASA's mission where they use a space telescope to hunt for asteroids and comets in our solar system that could impact Earth. And when he died, Carl was working on something called the NEO Surveyor, a new space telescope that he helped design, which is even more sensitive and good at detecting objects in space. Basically, Carl built the systems, the algorithms that would find these dark, cold objects against the even darker and colder space atmosphere using the heat that the objects borrow from the sun, which is interesting, very interesting. And I mean, with all these asteroids and things hitting the Earth randomly, we'll talk about that. It's very interesting. So the NEO Surveyor is being developed by the Jet Propulsion Lab, which, as we know, is managed by NASA at Caltech. Now let's look at the locations. Carl Grillmere and Monica Reyes, California. Jason Thomas and Nuno Lareo, Massachusetts. Melissa Cassius and General McCasland, New Mexico. All of these places fall into what is known as the Defense Aerospace Corridor, geographic clusters in the U.S. where military, aerospace intelligence, and advanced research are heavily concentrated and interconnected. Let's go back to Russ Coulthart and see what he thinks about all of this.
Oh, hi, Natasha. The thing that worries me most of all is the question, does the general not want to be found? I know some people are pointing towards possible suicide, but I was happy to see in that report that Alex clarified that there's no evidence the general was suicidal, and his wife has actually spoken very highly of his mental capacities. And friends of his who travelled with him, they tell me that a week earlier he'd actually cycled 60 miles. So this is not a man who was at the end of his life, somebody who was contemplating possible mental incapacity. He wasn't suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's. There doesn't seem to be any motivation for suicide. I do think we have to ask now the possibility of foul play. Is there somebody who has interceded to take the general out of the picture? He was a man with some of the most sensitive US military intelligence secrets in his head, especially particle beam technology. And as Alex acknowledged, he was involved in abortive attempts prior to the Hillary Clinton-Donald Trump election campaign in 2016 to negotiate with John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, about, believe it or not, UAP transparency. There was a discussion underway in which General McCasland was involved. It's a matter of public record now. The disappearance of General McCasland closely follows the announcement by President Trump that he will, and he has pledged to do this, be making a disclosure about UAPs, extraterrestrials.
Yeah, absolutely. We know McCasland worked for several government programs, including the Global Positioning System, or GPS, the Space-Based Laser Project Office, the Air Force Research Laboratory, just to name a few. Do you think any of his positions made him a potential target? And also, we saw in that report, the Russians once hacked his email. I mean, what do you make of his wife saying no one would be interested in 13-year-old secrets? Do you agree?
Well, certainly his wife made the point that there's been no change in his security clearance since 2013. But what that obscures is that since he left the service of the US Air Force, he's been working with a private military contractor that has been directly involved in particle beam technology research. It's very common for people like the general, very senior military officers with extensive knowledge from their military service, to go into private service. And he's been very heavily involved in secret programs that are part of special access programs with the US and intelligence departments, which frankly are still ongoing. So the idea that somehow his knowledge is dated or obsolescent doesn't hold. He is an extremely important military figure with incredibly important secrets inside his head, and his disappearance, I know for a fact, is an issue of grave concern to people at the highest levels of the Pentagon.
Ross isn't done. Okay, he still has more to say.
The public has been lied to, and President Trump realized this. And the interesting thing is, what's happening at the moment is Trump has very slowly started indicating that he's willing to pull back the layers, to show the public what the deep state, and this does fit with his moral narrative, that there's this deep state that has been withholding information from the American public, and indeed, he believes, trying to undermine his authority and his potential leadership. So for him, there's a motivation in revealing what he knows. Now, I got told by people very close to the Trump camp that in his first administration, he was going to make a disclosure about UAPs.
And what happened?
He got scared. I'm sorry to have to say this about the most powerful person in the world, but the commander-in-chief of the US military was scared of his own government. He became aware that there are forces inside the US government that frankly would and have killed to protect this secret. And he wasn't entirely confident that he could feel safe in making a statement at the time about what he knows.
So many people would say that's impossible. Donald Trump feels as though he's omnipotent at this point, given all of the actions that he's taken recently by executive action, going to war without Congress, et cetera. What kind of people would have any kind of threat power over the president?
For quite some time, there has been a warning in America, and it goes right back to President Eisenhower's speech when he left office. And if you remember, he talked about a military-industrial complex that was out of control. And that was quite something from the man who'd led America to victory in World War II. President Eisenhower, in one of the last statements that he made as the President of the United States, warned the American public that he was concerned that there was a military-industrial complex that was actually getting out of control. What I've been investigating for much of the last 8 years, and every time I start digging, I find more and more to substantiate this view, is that there is a private military contractor industrial complex that is completely out of control. A lot of what is going on in America at the moment is due to the fact that trillions of dollars have been expended on expenditure that is being kept secret from the American public. This isn't something that's been concealed, the fact of this expenditure. You might remember that prior to 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld, the defense secretary, actually admitted that there were trillions of dollars that couldn't be accounted for in the defense budget. There are people like Catherine Austin Fitz, a former very senior government official, who's admitted that when she did audits, there were vast amounts of US defence expenditure that could not be accounted for. But what has been going on is a lot of what America knows about the UAP mystery has been privatised. It's gone into the private world. And I know that there have been literally blue on blue confrontations where American troops under the command of JSOC were actually sent to retrieve a craft, an object that crashed. I think it was in Mexico. And in the course of their attempted retrieval, US Special Forces soldiers were killed or wounded by private military contractors who were trying to protect what was allegedly their technology. And this is how absurd it's got, that this ridiculous Cold War has been going on between the Russians, the Chinese, and the Americans. There's been so much secrecy now about this legacy program involving the retrieval of non-human technology. Not only are we in competition with the Russians and Chinese over it, there are battles, in some cases, deaths, where people have been killed in an effort to protect and retrieve this technology. That's how serious this is. I've spoken to people who say that people have been murdered to protect this secret. Now, this is what we've been trying to get Congress to investigate, but sadly, Congress has shown that it's completely ineffectual and very much in the thrall of many of these private military contractors that exercise such an undue influence in the Congress.
Okay, so then I think it was April 1st, former Congressman Matt Gaetz. I'm not up on politics and who's bad and who's good and who we should hate. And I just take the information in and then see kind of who confirms it and what we know about it. But I hear Matt Gaetz is bad. I don't pay enough attention because I think all politicians are bad. But anyways, Matt Gaetz, he goes on this show or podcast and he says he has talked to a U.S. Army whistleblower who briefed him on secret alien-human hybrid breeding programs. This alleged program involves captured extraterrestrials mating with humans who have been abducted from war zones and migrant caravans to create hybrids for multiple things, including remote viewing, intergalactic communication. Now, I know some of you are like, ugh, I can't believe we're talking about this. This is so ludicrous. This is so ridiculous. Does it sound like something our government wouldn't do? Does it? That's all I'm going to say. Okay, so now let's go back to Congressman Tim Burchett, who was asked about Matt Gaetz's claims.
Okay, I want to play you a soundbite. Former colleague of yours, Matt Gaetz, making some pretty shocking statements yesterday about aliens. Take a look.
I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. Aliens that were living were in forced breeding programs with humans that had been abducted from war zones and from even the caravans of migrants.
All right. I mean, I don't have the tinfoil hat on just yet, Congressman, but I'm wondering, kind of how you react to that, because you are connected. You're on the UFO subcommittee. I mean, I'm just wondering what you make of that. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, I'm still a member of Congress, so I can't really comment too much on what Matt said. But I will say this.
Wait, seriously? Are you being serious, or is that tongue in cheek?
I've been 100% serious.
Okay.
I've been 100% serious. I've been briefed by just about every alphabet agency there is. And I'll just tell you this, if they would release the things that I've seen, you would stay up, you'd be up at night worrying about or thinking about this stuff. We just need to disclose it all. I'm sick of it. Well, I was briefed. I'll just tell you this. I was briefed last week on an issue, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago. And it would have set the earth on this country would have come unglued, I think, if they would have heard all that I heard. They would demand answers. And we need to. But it's never going to get, unfortunately, it just keeps getting covered up, and the people that know are dying or disappearing, as the case may be.
Wow.
And for the record, I'm not suicidal. and I don't take risks.
I'm glad you said that. I'm speechless, Congressman. We will have you back.
You should be.
I am.
Release it all. And the problem is the people that are around the president don't know and the president doesn't know the questions to ask. A few of us are going to have to get with the president and tell him what he needs to ask and where he needs to look. I mean, we're in meetings and they give addresses and tell locations of items, I'll just say. And the public has a right to know, dadgummit. It's your tax dollars.
Absolutely.
Let's get it out there.
You got my.
So at first you can hear him. He says, this stuff that I know, you would stay up at night worried. And then he quickly pivoted and recovered. And he said, you'd stay up thinking about this stuff. Remember, he's a sitting member of Congress. So Tim Burchett's still going to follow the party line of soft disclosure, not causing widespread panic. So that's kind of where we're at. And there's more coming out every day. It's been an interesting time. I will say it is an interesting time to be alive, but that's probably enough for today.
Kofi, follow me.